All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed those two interviews we did. We're hoping to keep doing things like that throughout the year. Anytime anybody wants to come on, let us know. We want to do a SEC preview. We've been hyping this up for a little bit now. We're excited to kind of just go through the storylines of each of these teams in the SEC. We did a pretty deep dive during the Atlantis on some of these teams. We won't quite go as deep as that for these guys, but we, part of this we'll be Googling along with you at some time. So we're going to Google so you don't have to on some of this stuff. We also just want to get you a sense of like Auburn thoughts going into these different games and what to get excited for, what to worry about, what players to watch that kind of come off the top of our heads. Matt's got the preseason SEC men's basketball rankings up. This is what the media thought would happen this year. And we're going to kind of just go from top to bottom and like what our storylines are, what's going on with those teams. Matt, you want to go through them with us?
Bottom to top, we're going to go, right? We're going to go worst to best in the media poll. And I just want to point out, for people who maybe haven't, aren't paying attention to basketball all the time, the cool thing about SEC basketball is you play every team at least once. There are some teams you play twice, home and away. So you play everybody, which if you're just a football fan, football schedules are annoying because you only play certain teams. You play certain teams in your conference less than Clemson over the last few years. Sorry, we're not supposed to talk about football. But starting out at the bottom, picked last, Georgia. Georgia was picked last in the preseason poll. Tom Crean, we were talking last night about how many coaches have been to a Final Four. Tom Crean's one of them. Georgia, he just hasn't gotten good traction there, even with Anthony Edwards and stuff in the past. Who's a great player in the NBA now. Georgia's down there at the bottom. I believe they're like 5-7 this year so far. They've lost to ETSU last night. They've had some kind of rough losses. They did beat Memphis, which we approved of.
They've lost to Cincinnati, Georgia Tech, Virginia, Northwestern, Wofford. They did beat Memphis, but Memphis, as we've seen, they're not a good team. They're very poorly coached from Penny Hardaway over there, but they do have talent. They lost to George Mason. They lost to East Tennessee State. It's going to be right now looking like one of the worst all-time UGA teams, and that's saying something because they are not good historically.
And I've got a couple narratives for the, number one, we poached their best player, KD Johnson, and, he's playing an important role for us. He would have been the star of this Georgia team most likely. And the other narrative for me, at least, is Bruce Pearl has just built his little Auburn empire around recruiting in Georgia. When you talk about getting the Jared Harper, Bryce Brown, even if they're not highly recruited, going into Georgia, getting those guys, and then it's picked up with Isaac Okoro, Jabari Smith. Georgia being down is very good for Auburn basketball's health. And I think the narrative is, Auburn plays Georgia twice. They always do every year. Can Auburn, beat this team both times like it probably should?
Yeah, there's all those transfers that went out of the program. I think we're in a territory right now of, like you said, it's huge for us that they stay down because we need that territory. We saw it in football, how hard, not talking about football too much, but how hard it's been when Clemson and Georgia are up because that is where we recruit. And the same basketball, we recruit out of Atlanta constantly, like you were saying. A big funny thing is we're in this territory now with a Tom Crean where he's not a good coach at Georgia. It's just not working at all. And so you want it to go badly this year, but if it goes too badly, they fire him. And every time they make a new hire, sadly, in the past, maybe with Georgia, you didn't feel this way, but now that the SEC is really investing money in basketball, and you can tell they are always on the precipice with a talent standpoint. They even got Anthony Edwards, even when they're awful. So if they can get that kind of guy when they're that awful, you wonder what they can do when they actually get a good coach in there. So you just worry, enjoy this year. If this is as bad as we think it's going to be with Tom Crean, at any moment they could fire him and go make a huge splash hire. This kind of guy that can take this untapped talent into Georgia. We hope that they just keep the trend going. They've never been a great program, so we just hope that the trend continues. So we'll see. This should be easy wins for us, but we lost that Anthony Edwards team, I think, was it last year, the year before? So it can happen, but we've owned them for the most part.
Yeah, and you just got to hope that continues. I have not watched any Georgia basketball this year, I'll be honest. But it seems like the results aren't pointing in the right direction. And if Auburn's going to be competing at the top of this league, like we'll talk about when we get there, you really got to take advantage and beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. But Georgia, was it last year or 2 years ago? They have played us well at times. I think Auburn's had a pretty dominant record in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe 7-3, 8-2. But the theme of this preview is going to be a lot of these teams are very dangerous. And if you don't play up to your standard, you can get beat.
Yeah, true. And this would be a bad loss. There's going to be losses in the schedule against good teams, and you want at the end of the year to have 2 or 3 or 4 losses. And probably it might be one of those years where there's a winner with, we've seen years where there's a winner of the league with 2 losses or 1 loss. It might be a 4 or 5 loss winner even. So we'll see about that. And if you lose to a team like Georgia on a bad night, these are the kind of teams you have to, even if you have a bad night, you have to beat Georgia. If we lose to Georgia, no matter how bad our night is, it's not good. There's other teams on the schedule. If we have a bad night and lose to them, it's forgivable. We learn. It's hard to beat Alabama at Alabama or Tennessee at Tennessee. It won't be with Georgia. We'll be having a sad podcast after Georgia games if we lose to them.
Yeah. Well, so let's move on. Vanderbilt picked 13th. Jerry Stackhouse still the coach. Was it Scottie Pippen Jr., probably their star player? They are 7-4, I believe, right now. Auburn hosts them in mid-February, and that is it. So they get a home game against Vanderbilt. Again, another one of these games you're really going to want to get, not to get too far into the net metrics stuff, but you don't want to lose at home to bad teams. That's one of the things that really can hurt your resume. So anything you want to – what are you thinking? When you think Vanderbilt basketball right now, they've really been bad compared to their history the last few years. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, when I was growing up, Vanderbilt basketball was one of the stars of the SEC. I mean, they weren't great, but that was kind of like their shining thing was like, sure, they're awful at football and some other sports, but their basketball team's pretty smart and they kind of fit in with that like Duke, North Carolina, like smart schools, good at basketball kind of thing. And they've just been terrible. You hate that it's the one game I actually want Auburn to play away. I hate their court and everything, but Matt lives in Nashville. I used to live in Nashville and I enjoyed going to those games when it was like an opportunity to get the Nashville Auburn club up there for a game. So when you see it's just a home game, you wish you could trade that out with another away game we don't care about. I don't know if we play at Missouri or play at, one of these other teams, Texas A&M or something like that. You wish you could trade it out so the Auburn fans could go enjoy it in Nashville, even if they have the weirdest court ever where I don't know how people don't get hurt every time. I think a big storyline with them is the Scottie Pippen Jr. thing. I don't know where I need to look up his stats, but I'm pretty sure he's one of the few people that's like playing as well as Jabari almost from a statistical standpoint. So it might be fun just to see the matchup. That might be one that even if it's on the SEC network or whatever, he's going to get hyped up. He got picked. We had our little SEC preview stuff here. He was picked as the SEC Player of the Year preseason. I guess it's tough. Is Scottie Pippen Jr. He's not a freshman, right?
I want to say he's a sophomore. Is that right?
Yeah, it's tough to pick someone like Jabari that we just don't know. I mean, there's been plenty of 5 stars like Jabari that were supposed to be can't miss and just did not play that well. So I think media and people are a little tentative to pick a guy like Jabari to go all the way. I think when we look up the end of the year right now, if we had to like be betting people, I bet you that Oscar should be way. We'll have to figure out how to say that at some point. Jay did such a good job of saying that, and maybe him or Scottie Pippen Jr. or Jabari. So we'll see who ends up doing that. Their losses right now, they're 7-4. They have some pretty bad losses. They lost to VCU 48-37. 48-37. That's a football score, people. Vanderbilt scored 37 points in a game. They also lost to SMU 84-72, Temple 72-68. They lost to that Loyola, Illinois, Chicago team that we played. Lost to them 69-58. So that's a good, not that it works out every time that you can say if you beat a team, they beat a team, but so that's good to see they lost a team that we already beat. So I don't think there's too much to worry about Vanderbilt. It's another one of those that if you lose, you're upset about it. It's going to be a bad podcast.
Right. Agreed. So Texas A&M was picked 12th. Buzz Williams has made a little bit of a splash there. Good coach, good resume. Again, like the theme in the SEC the last few years has been really experienced, good coaches coming into the league, including Bruce Pearl, and many others. They're picked 12th, and Auburn plays them at home. Again, another team, they only play them once, play them at home. They beat A&M. Did they break a big winning streak at home, I think, that Auburn had a few years ago? I just remember Auburn really laid an egg in one of those games when A&M had a couple of big guys.
I think that was the team that beat us at home. And it was really frustrating that like it wasn't the kind of game we should have lost. And it was an upset. And that I think it was in that year that we were peaking at just the right time. We just happened to drop that one. It was very like it didn't fit our team's personality at all that we would drop a game like that, but they just had our number.
So anything about them? I'm looking at their schedule now. They beat Butler. They won at Notre Dame. And the thing with Buzz Williams teams, they lost to a close one to TCU. They're going to play really hard. This team and another team we'll talk about next, they are going to play you physically. It's going to be a war when you go play them. And no matter, I think he's building up the talent slowly there. Maybe not there yet, but that's not a fun team to play.
And Buzz Williams, we looked it up last night, but now I'm blanking again. He was a Marquette coach, right? Marquette, and then Virginia Tech. Yeah. I don't know if I guess they poached him from Virginia Tech. I don't think he had some decent years, I think, in the NCAA. So it's a big deal that they brought him over. Texas A&M, we always know, has all this stupid amount of money, more money than they can figure out what to do with. But they're spending it. So is everybody else in the SEC. It's another story, like you said, of an SEC team starting to embrace it. You hope that he doesn't turn the corner. They're not picked to do very well, but we're looking at their schedule. They've only had 2 losses. I mean, they're the 2 losses to, lost to Wisconsin. They beat Notre Dame, who beat Kentucky. So that's decent. And at Notre Dame too, which is a thing. Beat at Butler. I think Butler's down this year, but it's still, Butler's a basketball team. Everybody else is pretty normal. At Oregon State, what a weird schedule. Playing at Oregon State there, and at Notre Dame, and at Wisconsin. What a that's kind of tough out there. We were talking about playing at St. Louis, and they played some at people. So, with that only 2 losses, we might be needing to pay a little more attention to them, maybe.
Well, and I think what you're going to see is, maybe A&M and this next team, but once we get past this, I mean, any of these teams are decent. I know I bang that drum all the time, but I think this year, more than any year, maybe there's not Alabama. I don't think is elite at this point. I'm not convinced Auburn is elite. Kentucky has talent, but we'll see. But I think it's going to be a war from team 1 to team 10 or 11, and A&M could easily work their way up into that bubble territory. I mean, everybody's gonna start to figure out what you actually have when you start playing these conference games.
And like you said too, I think you mentioned that he went to a Final Four. This is another one I'd love to count at the end of this if we can, or find the statistic how many Final Four coaches we have to play against. We love that Bruce made the Final Four, and we are living off of that. And then you look up, and so many teams we're playing went to the Final Four. We just had talked about 3 teams at the bottom tier of the SEC. And 2 of those coaches have been to Final Four. Tom Crean's been to Final Four, and so has this guy Buzz Williams at Texas A&M. And we're about to talk about the next team, South Carolina, another Final Four coach. They had a great run a couple years back. Maybe it's starting to age for sure by now, 6 or 7 years back, where they just caught fire defensively, I believe, and that they have a certain kind of style. If you're talking about Frank Martin teams, he had Bruce's number for a little bit there with how rough he plays. He's got a style of just fouling the mess out of people and playing super rough and making the game really dirty and not fun to watch at all. It turns into a whistle fest every time. It's I think it's bad for basketball. It's kind of like for watching Virginia, at least you can respect a little bit this old man, slow style of basketball. I don't know if you can respect the South Carolina basketball. It's just so not fun to watch. It just sets us back, but that's what you need to watch out for. We've kind of breaking through. I feel like with South Carolina, there was a time where we had that circled as man, let's see if Bruce can break through on this rough basketball. We've broken through, but it's still something to watch if we get in trouble.
You also remember, that's where the Anthony McLemore injury happened that really derailed that season. You're right. There's a lot of history there. Auburn's done better. I was at a SEC tournament game a couple years ago, and Auburn took care of them pretty nicely. They are not as talented. I'm glad you mentioned that. Sindarius Thornwell is a tremendous player for them, got them to the Final Four. Again, 3 out of 4 coaches so far have made a Final Four. And you mentioned, just to add on, Bruce, had never made it. until, this weren't run at Auburn. I think that's why it was so important, not just for our program, but for Bruce himself to prove that, hey, he had done everything else in the sport except win a title and go to the Final Four, which in college basketball is kind of the thing. So South Carolina, they have some decent wins. They beat Georgetown. They beat Florida State. They have a couple done. They lost to Princeton. They lost by 24 to Coastal Carolina. Lost by double digits to Clemson. Both of those were on the road. So, again, a lot of these teams on the lower half of the league, they may have decent records. They have some decent wins, but can they handle the game-to-game grind that the SEC is going to be? And like you said, their style, unless something has changed, it's just very different. I also wanted to point out we play them twice, both home and away. So hopefully that's a good thing this year with our talent, to be able to play them twice. And we are their first SEC game on Tuesday, January 4th.
That's the second game. Is that right after LSU?
I believe so.
Yeah, I'll take that. Maybe not great for Flanagan to play such a rough game on his second game, but get us ready for the next couple games. Or to play South Carolina as our second game, then a couple other teams. It's already not great that we're playing the LSU team that's probably leading that. Like, if we're not the leading SEC team, they are. It's one of the two, it feels like. So
anything else? I think that's pretty good for Frank Martin's Gamecocks there.
Yeah, I wish we knew enough to deep dive even more into what their players are up to and all that, but we don't. So
we will be keeping a good eye around the league. I think the thing with basketball is, we're going to obviously be recapping mainly the Auburn games, but we probably will add a segment for SEC play that's just, hey, here's the finals that have happened this week so far, and you start to get those storylines and hear those players, like who's coming through in those big moments. What, our team's going up? Are they healthy? Are they going down? So we will definitely be touching on the SEC, probably not as much as, other podcasts potentially, but we're going to be pretty Auburn focused, but we will start to see those storylines more once conference play starts. Number 10, Missouri.
I know next to nothing about this team. If there's a team on this schedule I don't know a lot about, it's Missouri, man. They were supposed to be our team in the SEC when they came over to become a conference member. They were supposed to be the basketball team. That was what they were trying to sell. Really what they were trying to sell is TV rights to another state. But the thing they tried to say is a good reason why they should come is they're not a good cultural fit, really. It's strange. If you ask me to name all the SEC teams, Missouri is probably the last one I end up naming. I'm probably trying to think what I'm missing, and they're supposed to be good at basketball. They have not been good at basketball. You forget about it. When that game comes up on your schedule, you're like, okay, what's going on over there? I have not heard that name in years, so tell me something if you know anything.
Well, I know a few things. Missouri, I believe, still coached by Quanzo Martin, who is at Tennessee. They're picked 10th, so they were picked preseason a little ahead of some of these teams we've talked about already. Xavier Pinson was a really good guard for them, who's now at LSU, so he left. They are 6-6. They lost to Kansas City. Decent losses, by a lot to Florida State, lost to Wichita State, lost by 21 to Liberty.
Florida State's bad this year, by the way. I think they were picked to be good this year. I need to investigate what's going on with Florida State. We saw that the last team we looked at, South Carolina, I think, had beaten Florida State, but they're not great. So losing by 30 to Florida State's not a great look.
They lost by 37 to Kansas and 25 to Illinois. Both those were on the road, but those are pretty big blowouts, and they start their conference season by playing at Rupp Arena. So it wouldn't surprise me, just based on what little I do know, if they were to maybe slide lower than what they were preseason picked, behind a team like A&M maybe, or a South Carolina team or something like that.
Those teams all feel like they can move around a good bit in that little bad, other than maybe UGA. They really look defeated and bad and just waiting for that guy to get fired at this point.
Well, and we play Missouri only once on the road. So that, again, that's probably a good draw for Auburn. If you've got a few teams you're only going to play on the road, that's one you hope you can get. You're always nervous on the road in the SEC. That's in with basketball the way it is. So many results can change, but I like that draw for Auburn now.
That'll be one of the very few you'll hear us talk about, I think, how hard away game wins are. Not only do you shoot hopefully we come out and we fix it a little bit. We've had some really bad away shooting the last couple of years, and we're not alone in that. It's hard to win away games in the SEC, but one like Missouri, there'll be few of them like that. That if we can't win at Missouri, that's bad. That'll be something we're gonna have to like talk about. Losing at Alabama or Tennessee or Kentucky, even Arkansas, LSU, Florida. Those aren't so bad. At Ole Miss, Mississippi State, those you don't want to lose them, but they're like you can understand them. So, but
Well,
lose at Missouri, that'll be an issue.
and again, the metrics, it matters. Like, you get credit for, depending on where their rankings are and stuff, you get credit for going on the road and beating a mediocre team, because it is like the people who judge college basketball know that that's a challenging thing. So again, that's actually a better for your resume. It'll count as a better win if you go on the road and beat Missouri than if you were to lose to them at home or beat them at home.
Yeah.
So anyway, so number 9 preseason pick, Ole Miss. Kermit Davis, former MTSU coach up in my area here in Middle Tennessee. Really good coach, a little bit of a crazy person, but most of these basketball coaches are. Plays some really fun if you're not playing them, changing defenses, some 1-3-1 half-court traps that drops into kind of a matchup zone. Really had probably more than any team on this, in the conference has given Bruce trouble the last few years. There have been some ugly, close losses. Last year, right, with Sharif? We had an overtime loss to them, I think.
I don't know if we talked about the last pod. I feel like maybe we did already get to the Ole Miss. Maybe that was just off on a different phone call or something. But Ole Miss, like you're right, they've had our number the last couple of years. It was Frank Martin for a couple of years there that felt like even if their team wasn't that great, they're going to give Bruce fits. It feels like it's Kermit Davis now. Maybe this whole Jabari Smith breaking the zone kind of stuff is going to completely change that. I would love for us to break through this year. It'd almost be fun if we like predict what the next team will be that gives us fits just by the way they play. But it was good to see us go through Syracuse the way we did with that zone. So I don't know if they play the exact kind of zone, but it's just good to
different.
See.
It's going to take away that easy. Well, I was talking about Jabari Smith, how he's kind of the cheat code. Really, we played them twice, home and away. So we
always do, right? With Ole Miss, is that like part of the deal, or there's certain teams that you always play twice, right? We're always going to play
you're right.
Twice.
I think it's Alabama, Georgia, and Ole Miss are the teams we always play twice, and then the other two rotate.
Yeah, and so this Ole Miss one, the big thing we've struggled with them with that zone. We had to like break in and drive on the zone. It's been really difficult. We've had a lot of possessions where we go down there and pass the ball around the 3-point line a bunch of times and then end up near the end of a shot clock taking a contested 3. And that's the whole offense. And so you hope we can figure out how to break through that with some of the great players we have. I don't know if there's some lobs we can get in there to Kessler or what we're going to do. It's just going to be something to watch to see if we struggle early in these games and all we're doing is shooting contested 3s away. It could be tough.
They're another team that's just physical. I mean, they will bring the battle to you. Maybe not as aggressively so as South Carolina traditionally, but they're not fun to play. And they've had a mixed bag. They beat Memphis, which we kind of doubt how good of a win that is. They lost to Stanford.
No idea what to do with Memphis now. I'm gonna in my head. This is an Auburn podcast. Memphis is bad. Alabama is bad for losing to Memphis. No one gets credit for beating Memphis. That's where we're at right now, and that's how I'm going to keep talking about it.
That's fair. And they lost to Boise State. They lost by 23 to Western Kentucky. Their best win is Memphis. So they're another team, and they start, SEC play with Florida and at Tennessee. So, they're going to find out real quick where they stand.
We haven't seen the schedule yet where for these lower teams, it's not like there's nobody good for them to play at this point. SEC is like, it's not as deep as maybe some thought it would be going into that at conference. We've had some teams they thought were going to be great, like Alabama or like Kentucky, that have lost games they shouldn't have. So it's kind of taken our reputation down a little bit, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tougher than it's ever been, probably.
All right. Anything else on Ole Miss?
I'll have one thing on Ole Miss. We have some sordid history with Ole Miss. They have a player, what's his name? Henderson. That gave
Marshall Henderson.
Marshall Henderson. That gave us we gave him the finger because he went nuts out there on the court on us one time. And I watched a great documentary by Vice following him maybe 5 or 6 years ago where he was playing in Iraq. That's where he ended up playing professionally in Baghdad, I believe, in Iraq. So if you're looking for some interesting like deep dive kind of thing and you're just sitting there for lunch and you want something to watch, it's actually pretty interesting to see a guy like that probably one of the best players in the country, really good to play. And if you just don't make the NBA or the G League, which is a small percentage of players get to make that, you're in Baghdad playing basketball, trying to get paid before every game.
He's a good player. He was the Andy Kennedy era Ole
Is
Miss.
he is he on a coaching staff now too? Did I see that he's like an assistant coach or something?
Andy Kennedy's at UAB.
No, Marshall Henderson.
No, I know. I don't know if he would have followed him there or something.
Look that
Google.
up. Yeah, we can go on to the next one if I see on here.
All right. Well, the number 8 team in the preseason poll was Mississippi State, coached by Ben Howland. Another, I believe that's the 4th Final Four coach in the SEC. Mississippi State is a decent team. Let me pull up their thing. They are at what, like 8-3, 9-3 maybe. I should have looked at that before I pulled up their schedule.
I looked at Marshall Henderson, and he did coach for 1 year as a graduate assistant in 2020. So that was last year. So I don't actually know what he's doing now. But according to his Wikipedia page, I assume he's not still the coach, or they would have changed the stat to 2020, 2022. But maybe no one's editing Marshall Henderson's Wikipedia page that often,
Yeah. They've kind of taken care of business. They lost on the road at Louisville. They lost to Minnesota in P5 game. They lost a close one at Colorado State, but they've won everything else. I'm going to pull up there. Yeah, Mississippi State, I thought they were the team we played twice every year. We do. We have a long history with them in football, but I guess Ole Miss is that team because we only play them once, and that game is in Starkville. And the Hump, as it's affectionately known, is a tough place to win historically. Like, it's just one of those kind of maybe it's just because it's a weird older arena. But
these away games are tough, man. There's not an away game in the SEC you feel great about, really. Maybe Georgia, maybe Missouri. But like, you're right, that we have a history, and maybe this is our own PTSD or whatever of Lebo years and Barbie years and stuff, that we play at Ole Miss and at Mississippi State a lot more than these different schools. You kind of have like all these memories of like mediocre Auburn teams losing to mediocre Mississippi State teams in the Hump,
Well, and we play them at the very end of the year. So after that big Tennessee game that everybody's going to be hyped up about, the last 2 regular season games are at Mississippi State and then South Carolina at home. So
that's great. I'm glad that's how the schedule works out, because it could be coming down to the wire, and it'd be nice to be playing 2 teams like that, to where like if we have to get hyped up to beat them, we won't have to get hyped up to beat them if it's coming down to the wire, I guess.
They have a guard that I remember now from the last couple of years, Iverson Molinar. He's like a little point guard, scoring point guard. He's 3rd in the SEC right now, behind Scottie Pippen Jr., who we discussed, J.D. Note at Arkansas. So he can fill it up. I want to say they have a big guy.
You were talking about Iverson Molinar. That's what you were just saying.
Yeah.
Because he's on the first team All SEC preseason poll. So
yeah,
you're not alone in respecting him to have. We'll see. We've had 2 games in a row, I think, against St. Louis now, and I guess we skipped one. So St. Louis and the last game we played Murray State, where we had some guards running past our guys and had a really hard time switching people on to try to stop these guys. So it'll be interesting to see somebody like Molinar if they tear us up.
Oh yeah. Well, so as we get into these better teams, I do want to get a little deeper into who's actually playing. No offense to the lower half of the league. We'll learn about your players when we play you. So Florida was ranked number 7th in the preseason poll. They're 9-3. Mike White has a weird existence there, where Florida has such a great tradition in basketball, at least in the last 20, 30 years. And he seems like he's been like at times on the hot seat, and they don't really know what to do with him. They've gotten in the tournament a decent amount, but it's usually as a lower seed. Spent a lot of time on the bubble.
He's very much like just riding the line of acceptable there, and it's kind of like I don't want to use metaphors for other sports, but they believe they can be better. They've seen them be better. They won 2 national championships in a row. They had a great coach, Billy Donovan, back in the day. It was like Florida and Kentucky back and forth for a little bit there, and I think they believe that it's where they should be in the hierarchy. And so if you look at the rest of the SEC, they play really well. They're just consistently going to the tournament, and that's tough, and consistently being competitive. But when your expectations are really high, it's tough. So if you look at comment sections and stuff in Florida, their fans are not happy with him. But when you lose to Texas Southern at home, that's the kind of stuff that'll get you fired eventually.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest, that got national attention. Texas Southern was 0-7. Hadn't won a game, went into Gainesville, won by double digits, and it wasn't that close. It was like the final was 15. They were down by more than that in the second half. And that's kind of the weird blemish, though. They lost a close-ish game to Oklahoma on the road. They lost to Maryland by 2 on the road, 2 decent P5 programs. I think this Florida team actually can be pretty good. I think they were picked right below that top tier for a reason. They have a big guy, Colin Castleton, who's a really good big man. That's going to be a really fun matchup with Walker Kessler. Auburn does play Florida twice, home and away. So, yeah.
Preseason, first team All SEC, that Colin Castle guy. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys picked as a first team All SEC, and he's one of them. So, something to watch out for. Another interesting thing about Florida, one, they've been very scrappy. It feels like under Mike White, they've not shot well. Their offense hasn't been great. They had a team, I think, that I kept wanting Auburn to emulate at one point of just being scrappy. They just kept pulling out wins out of nowhere because they just kept like making games dirty, playing great defense, and their offense was awful. But it was fun to watch that. Sometimes your talent's just not there in offense, but you should always be able to scrap on defense, and that's how he's kind of made tournaments on scrapping like that. So it's kind of ugly to watch.
They're kind of like they're annoying to play. They're kind of the opposite of Bruce, right? Bruce is free flowing, up tempo, take shots. I don't care, like kind of bring the energy. And they're kind of very like, they play really hard. They're typically very good defensively with him. But they always seem to kind of underachieve on offense. And I don't know if that's because they underachieve or because the rest of the league is so dynamic and free flowing offensively that it almost just feels old school in a way. And it just doesn't look the same as the other teams almost.
Another interesting narrative one to go back a little further is I've also wanted us to be like the Florida from those days where they were winning 2 national championships, from an attitude of back then when it was Florida and Kentucky going back and forth in the league. It was just them two, really. I'm sure some other teams had little pop-ups here and there, but it was them two. And I was kind of hoping when we finally started breakthrough with Bruce and the rest of the teams sucked in the SEC, that's what it was going to be like. Like that happens. I feel like Kentucky always stays at the top and stays, but like other teams have their moments, and I was kind of hoping Auburn would have its moments for a couple of years as like the main competitor to Kentucky and nobody else. And now the SEC's invested so much money and hired all these Final Four coaches that it feels like we're constantly competing against. First it was Tennessee, like who's going to be like, Kentucky's a blue blood, but we were the new blood, but then Tennessee was having a good time. It was really frustrating because they got a lot of hype and they were competing with us to be a new blood, but we kept like taking that from them, being like, no, it's us, which is great. But then you got Alabama and you got LSU and maybe even Arkansas at times right now. So really like that whole concept of the two, like the bipolar SEC world, that it's always at Kentucky and always whoever's the up and coming team is just not really like the narrative that it can be anymore. We have several teams in there and it's just going to be a slug. You're not going to have that kind of like circling the Kentucky game kind of thing. You're going to have to circle a lot of games on the schedule.
You mentioned Vanderbilt back when it was Vanderbilt and it was Florida, and then that was it. The SEC had like 2.5 good teams per year usually, and it's just completely shifted now. The fact that LSU and Mississippi State, or not LSU, Florida and Mississippi State they're pretty decent teams. I think those are teams that could definitely make the tournament. I think Ole Miss could make the tournament. It's just, you're right. It's become more crowded at the top in the SEC than probably it's ever been.
Sadly, we have to talk about Will Wade and LSU. I absolutely hate it. It's everything wrong with college basketball. Bruce had that one journalist that we hate, Pat Forty, I think is his name, wrote that insane article. Maybe it wasn't Pat Forty who wrote this one, but someone wrote during our Final Four run that Bruce Pearl's everything wrong with college sports, which is just absolutely ridiculous. It should be the opposite. Bruce Pearl actually cares about college sports and wants to do well and wants his kid to do well. Will Wade, on the other hand, is like exposing the like underbelly of NCAA and like causing he's the water, the ice in the crack of the NCAA, just causing like the foundation to break by not getting punished for its insane behavior he's doing. And if he wins this year, he already won one SEC title through this, and people like, it just makes you squirm, and almost like you can feel college basketball fans just being like, just don't acknowledge it, just don't talk about it, and it's not there. If he can win another SEC title and do something in the March Madness, like he's making it, you have to look at it, like you can't like ignore the foundation breaking underneath you anymore. And it's so frustrating to even go in the threads or to lose to them and just have to be like, we lost them, but we should never be playing this game. Like, it's so frustrating.
We even our guy Charles was on, one of his interviews, just immediately goes right to that. Like, it's just not, it's kind of the unspoken thing that everybody knows about. And they're 12-0, and we'll talk about their schedule, but like they're 12-0. They were picked 6th in the league to start, preseason. They've been a little better than people thought, I think. And it's a huge storyline. We just spent a lot of time with Michael talking about obviously Auburn plays them the only time they play them this year at home to open SEC play. Talk about a massive game that, you think about a tiebreaker with them if you end up close to them in the standings. And it's LSU's litmus test. Jackson posted something on our Instagram page last night because Will Wade kind of went out of his way to just talk about Auburn, how difficult of an environment it is. We're not going to be able to get away with the stuff we're getting away with right now, next Wednesday when we go to Auburn. That game is going to be tremendous, and I cannot wait to watch it, even if it's on ESPNU.
Thank God it's on Auburn Arena, and so ridiculous that it's on ESPNU. I think we talked about that with Michael. Jay talked about this might be a team we have issues with on offense with our smaller guards. You wish maybe we could have another, you wish you could just start off. I don't know how you want to put the schedule together necessarily, but you don't want to start off against a 12-0 LSU. At least it's at Auburn Arena. It'll be interesting to see how the guards do, like Jay was talking about, if they have issues scoring. We've been talking about that all throughout a conference too, to see like when we play bigger and better teams, some of the smaller guys, how athletic they look comparatively. I think I'll put in my predictions later. There's a couple players I feel like are going to fade a little bit once we play better competition. Like right now, they can out athletic some of these other guys. I just hate that you have to talk about LSU at this point. Like, I wish we could just reset this. It's like, it's just corruption. Like, that's all it is. It's like you go back and forth. LSU, half of you wants to just ignore it and like move on. And like, it's frustrating 4 years in that we still have to have this conversation and remind people. Cause I think it feels like ESPN's just moved on. They're like, listen, we talk about Will Wade's corruption for 4 years. Like, how are we going to keep doing this? But that's what they want. They want us to just move on. Me and Matt talked about, I think, on different podcasts or maybe offline, that we think they might just be trying to wait out the NCAA at this point. Like, they're just ignoring the NCAA. UNC figured it out and did it and got away with it. We've talked about LSU's connections with the NCAA. The brother-in-law of the Mark Emmert, the NCAA president, is the AD there. Mark Emmert used to be the AD at LSU. It's a whole thing. Like, it feels like they really, like, they're causing it and also waiting on the NCAA just to collapse. And that could literally happen in the offseason. It could happen this offseason, next offseason, whatever. It'd be terrible for college basketball as much as we get irritated with the NCAA that like the commissioner type will be gone, because who's going to thrive in that is the LSUs and the Bamas and the Georgias that are willing to cheat and willing to mold the rules around what they want to get away with. And that's what's happening right now. It's going to be hard to watch college basketball and college sports in general if LSU keeps getting away with this and NCAA collapses at basically saying like, all right, you cheated too well, we have to go. Like, that's what it feels like right now.
Well, it's going to follow them if they're going to compete with the top half of this league and be in the race. I mean, it's going to follow them everywhere they go. Michael mentioned it, like, they're coming for them. I know the jungle will be all over it. I was at the game 2 years ago, the great Javon McCormick comeback at home against them. And people are not going to forget it, especially the teams that play them consistently and are kind of competing for that space. So it's almost like, I think you mentioned this earlier, if they succeed, the spotlight is going to go up on that. And if they don't succeed and don't have a great year, it almost kind of, people don't pay as much attention to it. I've even sensed a renewed, focus on it on the internet and how people are talking just because they're 12-0. And by the way, they're 12-0 for a reason. They have killed a lot of teams. They've had a lot of double-digit wins like us. They are, let me see, they're averaging beating teams by 24 points a game. They're almost tops in the country, holding teams to 53.5 points per game. And they have some guys that you'll recognize. Darius Days has been there forever, a big guy who can rebound and shoot threes. Xavier Pinson, experienced guard from Missouri. A guy, Eason, who's a forward for them, averaging over 16 points a game. I think Jay mentioned Eric Gaines as well, who's up there with steals per game as a guard. Like, just, they have a lot of talent. And I think the way Will Wade is talking about them he is kind of pushing. He thinks there's a lot of potential on that team to kind of. I think he thinks they can compete for it all, and their march towards that will start in Auburn Arena on Wednesday.
Let's look at their schedule again real quick. I know they haven't played anybody. I'd love to give a sense for people that are listening in and don't see the schedule. Like, who's their best win on here? Maybe Penn State at home, but Penn State maybe away at Wake Forest. There's
Belmont's a good team. They just beat
at
Alabama.
home, Belmont, at Georgia Tech. It's always hard to win away, but that's about it.
It's not much.
I'm just kind of looking at P5 teams. Really, you're right. You might be right. The Belmont win might actually be good because Penn State's a perennial, like with Georgia, one of those awful teams with what Auburn used to be. Wake Forest. I mean, I know they've had some decent teams in the past. I don't know how good they are this year. It says at Georgia Tech. I don't think they played at Georgia Tech. I thought they played in the Atlanta Thanksgiving tip-off thing like we did.
Neutral site, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably just as many LSU fans, even though it was in Atlanta.
Well, and like you said, they haven't been tested. Well, they're about to. So they mentioned that on the – I don't know why we're talking about LSU's schedule during the Auburn-Murray State game, but we were last night on the telecast. And they go at Auburn, Kentucky at home, Tennessee at home, at Florida, Arkansas at home, at Alabama, at Tennessee. I mean, that is vicious, and I hope they are humbled on it. I mean, it's one of those things I kind of want somebody to beat those teams they're playing too, so it's going to be interesting, but not them.
It's getting tough out there, right? On some of these like teams, you don't want anybody to win, honestly. So like it's hard. Like, do I want LSU to beat Kentucky? I don't know. I guess it kind of depends on if we beat LSU. If we beat LSU, then yeah, go out there and beat Kentucky because then it's like one less on Kentucky because we'll know we can beat LSU.
Anything on LSU, or have we slandered them?
I hate them.
We don't like them. It feels like a massive game, like with Auburn having this kind of team, and we think we think the ceiling is just so high. You host LSU at home. LSU's undefeated. They haven't really been tested. It's Bruce Pearl and Will Wade. There's a lot. The season's not over if Auburn loses, but like you want to protect home court. It would be a huge win to kind of keep showing people, hey, this Auburn team is for real. And it's going to be – I'm really excited for that game already.
The LSU game hurts to lose even more. I mean, I've just already ranted a bunch about the corruption and everything. People say there's like this innate feeling inside humans about fairness, that we have this like really like insane thing about wanting things to be fair. Children especially have this really like crazy thing when you're babysitting children, whatever, that everything has to be fair. If they get this, you get that. Blah, blah, blah. And so to see LSU getting away with stuff when we didn't like that, and there's this way worse than us. We've all talked about the NCAA stuff at this point. It almost turns you into a child a little bit when you lose to LSU, because it's already hurts to lose any SEC game like that. It hurts to lose to a rival. But man, when you lose to a team that you feel like is getting an unfair advantage, it's having corruption, it should have been gone before, you just have this extra like vitriol, like the comment sections and things you really like can feel like, from just like, man, that sucks we lose, to man, screw those guys, I hate losing to them, to like, you guys are morally corrupt. Somebody's gonna burn down that kid. Like, it makes me so angry. But that's my LSU stuff.
We're gonna move Jackson on from LSU so we can continue. Everybody hates them. I hope we beat them, and we will have a lot of fun on that podcast if we beat LSU on Wednesday.
Oh yeah.
Auburn was picked 5th in the league preseason. We'll talk about Auburn after we get through our list.
I'll talk about a little bit, just like where we are placed. I know we'll get way into Auburn. We get into Auburn everything. It annoys me that we got picked 5th. It feels like my thing with being picked 5th is the belief in Bruce Pearl. I feel like Calipari or Mike Kay or any of these other like more legendary coaches, I don't think Bruce is quite there and all that kind of stuff, but they get the benefit of the doubt when they bring in new recruits, when they bring in transfers and they have 4 new starters. Bruce still is not getting that. I don't know how much more he has to do to start getting that benefit of the doubt when talent comes in, that he's going to figure it out and he's going to do it right. We've seen every year how well he does at developing that he finds the talent. What a great eye at finding the talent. Like, it's really something with Bruce Pearl. I know we're bragging as fans or whatever, but it feels extremely underrated, and that we think he should be a bit higher up on the totem pole of the way they talk about coaches. He's such a great eye for finding these guys. Then once they're in, they're developed, and then he peaks them at the right time in the schedule. And so it just gets frustrating when you see him pick 5th, a bunch of other guys. I know they have talent. I know they have hype. We had a lot of hype too, and we just don't seem to be getting the benefit of the doubt that Bruce is going to be able to develop these guys better than the other people, better than the Rick Barnes, better than no, it's better than who was the other guy picked above us? There's one other team picked above us.
Musselman.
Arkansas. Musselman. I think you're already seeing with Arkansas right now the issues, like that they're not a Bruce Pearl coach team, and we have a Bruce Pearl coach team, and it frustrates me that we're fifth.
It's why Bruce and Auburn are a great marriage. It's the classic underdog syndrome. I think he fits us really well. And you're right. I mean, I think people, again, keep in mind this was a preseason poll. So before we ever saw Jabari Smith play, before we saw these new players, I think it was fair-ish. I think the upside was definitely there to be a top 3 or 4 team. Now I feel really good. I don't know about you, but just look, I mean, with what's happened, we'll see what happens in SEC play. But I feel like Auburn has a more realistic chance to win the league than I did before the season started, for sure. So anyway, top 4. We'll talk more about this, but obviously the top 4 is really important. Top 4 teams get a double bye in the SEC tournament, which is really valuable if you're going to try to win that. And Tennessee was picked 4th. We have a lot of, obviously, a big narrative there is Justin Powell. We've talked about Devin Cambridge wanting to dunk on him. We hope that happens. They play in Knoxville only one time on February 26th on a Saturday, and I plan to be there, along with Michael, apparently. And Rick Barnes has had Tennessee's arguably been the most consistent regular season SEC team, but they have very little to show for it.
The last 5 years, we still have more wins over them, even though that every time they think they've won something, we win it. We win the rings and all that stuff. But not only that, supposedly their thing is, okay, well, maybe they aren't in the rings, but they're really good in the regular season and have gotten the hype. Nope, we still got that. We still got more wins in the last 5 years than Rick Barnes does. So screw them. I'm tired of Tennessee fans.
We have the ludicrous shared SEC title where we beat them head-to-head in Knoxville.
Let's see if it happens again this year. It's so frustrating. When we won, and you can't even say it was at home. We won away. They should not get a share.
We beat them in the SEC tournament, which I was at Bridgestone Arena, which was an amazing experience. We've just consistently, we've obviously had the Final Four. Rick Barnes went to one Final Four in 2003, so he's, I believe, the 5th coach we'll play that has a Final Four in his resume. But if you talk to Texas people, if you talk to Tennessee people now, they get real nervous in March because they just haven't been, it really reminds you, because I'm glad we've had a lot of success against Tennessee. They're a good program. They're a good team. They have good players. It's hard. Auburn's beaten them 6 or 7 times in a row or something like that, but they're good. It just makes you realize how special, the Final Four run was that Auburn went on. Like, that is it. The 64 teams that make the field, a lot of them are going to lose, in the first, second, third round. So I hope it keeps going. They're an interesting case. Go ahead.
Have we won 6 in a row? Is that right? It was huge that we won last year in 2020.
I think it was
we had
6.
such a down team. They were supposed to have such a good team because it seems like we were holding serve a little bit, like we were ahead of them. And then they had a really down year in 2019-20. And I wish we could have put our foot on the throat. They had a really bad year. We were peaking at just the right time. COVID got in our way. I really think we would have won the SEC tournament and done something in March Madness, and it would have really put us above Tennessee in that bad year. And then we reversed it. We had our bad year and they had their good year last year. And so now it's back to kind of being on serve again with them. It's not as big of a deal as it was a couple of years back when we thought maybe we're competing with Tennessee to be the new bloods. Now there's several teams competing to be the new bloods, so it's not quite as bad. But we've had so much history now over the last couple of seasons with Tennessee fans and them thinking Rick Barnes is just now they're starting to get frustrated and start seeing it a little bit, but they think Rick Barnes is so great or whatever. They've had some great recruiting classes and stole some players that we wanted. The big one, Justin Powell, this year. So we really want to win. I think the players, it's giving them, Bruce Pearl doesn't need any extra incentive to want to beat Tennessee, but they have that extra incentive now with Justin Powell. It sucks that it's away because the signs and the memes and the fans would have gone nuts on Justin Powell. You hope Matt's going and Michael's going. We'll still get in a couple shots. I said on the other podcast, Justin Powell is my head rent free because I really thought he was going to be a great player, and it just really frustrated me that he had that weird concussion thing that people would still wonder what happened really. Did he really have a concussion the whole year? Was there a fight at some point? Was what happened? Clearly, after him transferring, we know something went wrong. We don't know exactly where things were to blame or whatever. He's at Tennessee. When I see a chance to look at the box score, I usually do to see how he's doing. He's fine. I thought he was going to be great last year after the way he started, and that he would be a starter on this team and be in that 3 position while Flanagan was out and really do really well. He's all right. He's coming off the bench. He's had a game or two that's been good. And he's got a couple games where he disappeared. So we'll see how he is by the end of the year.
Well, so Tennessee's good. I mean, and the thing you can say about them, they played a more difficult schedule than most of the teams we've seen so far. They lost to Villanova, who's a top, I don't know what they are now, but they're one of the top teams.
Lost a couple games, I think.
North Carolina seems like they're struggling, but they still win. They still beat North Carolina by 17. We broke North Carolina a few years ago.
But, Kentucky beat North Carolina in Vegas by like 30.
They did.
I think North Carolina is a little down, but it's still a big deal.
They just beat an undefeated Arizona team last night at home. They hosted Arizona. So I mean, but this is a good team.
That one really put it over the thing. I think coming into this game, if they had lost like we thought they would normally to Arizona, or just played another team like we did last night, I would have said like, here we go again. They're getting hyped up as a team, and we'll see if they're really any good or not. And that win over Arizona really kind of puts it over like, dang, they got some good wins. Like it's going to be tough. And
again, they do play Kentucky twice every year. That's one of their regulars. So, and their first 3 conference road games are at Alabama, at LSU, at Kentucky. Like, but again, we're going to find out real quick on some of these teams, some quick feedback on where they stand. I'll be really excited. We'll be podcasting about the LSU Auburn game, and Alabama Tennessee will be going on, so we'll probably be keeping an eye on that.
I guess I'll be cheering for Tennessee against Alabama because I just hate Alabama even more. But I just wish both teams could lose that game. There'll be a couple of those this year,
I did want to mention a couple of their guys. Fulkerson is a just super experienced big guy, crafty, winner, does a lot of little things to help them succeed. They have another guy, Josiah, what's his name?
Surprisingly, no first team or second team all SEC guys for a team that's top 4 in the league.
Kind of more of a team, less of it, but Vescovi's there, I believe, still. I
wanted to talk about Vescovi because that's such a weird story too. He came like twofold stories. He started his first game in college basketball against us at home. It was really a weird one because he's from Uruguay and they really needed a point guard, and then out of nowhere they were able to pluck this really, like, I think pretty decent player from Uruguay to be their point guard. And like, he played some like semi-professionally in South America for some of these teams, but somehow they got through with that. And it just felt really shady that he jumped in halfway through the season with some professional experience and they could just pluck him out of Uruguay. Like, was he going to class? I don't think so. Like, how is he not supposed to just wait till the next season? So it's really frustrating to have him come in. And he had a pretty good game against the first time, I think. He's a really crafty player. He's almost got like that European feel to him. Like, it just feels like some of these guys that don't grow up in American basketball and play that European or South America have like something else going on. The way they move, the way they pass, the way they play the game just seems, I don't know, maybe more crafty, or just like, it's frustrating. If you watch it, it's frustrating to watch him play. Like, he beats you and you don't know why. And I feel like it's just like unexpected things he does because they play a different style over there.
Yeah. No, they're an interesting team. I'm really curious. I didn't get to watch the Arizona game last night. They're kind of a wild card to me because on paper it kind of seems like, I don't know if Tennessee really has the firepower to, win the league necessarily, but they have been a good regular season program. They do have a lot of depth. I think they're like us. They have a bunch of guys who have experience, who have played. And, we'll see. I wish them nothing but the worst, except for in certain games when we want them to win.
It'd be easier at the end of the season when we know where we stand in the standings, who needs to beat who for us to like go up. But for those first couple ones, man, I want everybody to lose, and it's gonna be.
Yeah, no doubt. So third, Arkansas. I think you are discrediting Arkansas. I think they are quietly building. I think they are probably the program. Maybe Alabama, but they are the program I'm worried about for like long-term competing for championships. They recruit really well. Musselman is a psychopath, but again, a lot of these guys are. But
these guys seem to be able to make way more hay off of their like runs and recruiting than we get to sometimes. Like, that's part of the thing I was talking about with hype. When these teams come in with a lot of hype that we never seem to receive, we go in and win these things and play better than all these other teams, and then we get like hype right at the end because we actually do it. But these other teams like Tennessee and Arkansas seem to get the hype all season long, Alabama too, and they get to recruit off of that, and they get ESPN talking about them, and feels like it gets them a little like extra bump. And Arkansas feels that way this year. They recruited well last year, sure. They kept some Arkansas talent in. They kept a guy into Arkansas that we wanted when we've kind of pulled out some good Arkansas players in the past. But they went that Sweet 16 run, which is fine. A lot of teams go on Sweet 16 runs, and they like have built this hype that they are like got back in the 90s again, and that they're gonna like take over. Like, you hear Matt talk about how he's like, I just don't know, man. They don't look that good this year to me. We'll see. I hope it's not real. Maybe that's my fandom hoping it's a not real hype thing. It just gets frustrating that we don't seem to get that same hype when we've done way more than them. You know,
I was terrified of that team last year in the tournament. I thought I was thrilled when they lost, and they lost a really close game. I forget who it was to.
I didn't think it was Elite Eight, actually, now that I think
Maybe
about
it was
it.
Elite Eight. I think they were close, and they were, you could tell like they kind of had some Auburn 2019 vibes. Like that was a really good team. Their recruiting class, I believe, for next year is set to be like elite. So I'm more worried about them. And here's the other thing I was looking at just now. They have JD Notae, but
it was Elite Eight, yeah. So maybe I'm giving them not enough credit on that Elite Eight. You know, it is tough to make an Elite Eight. But
my two player notes: JD Notae leads the league in scoring and steals. He's a really experienced guard. And then they have the fake Jalen Williams, not like our Jalen Williams, who's a good rebounder, good inside guy. But look at this. They're 10-2. They lost to Oklahoma and Hofstra. They don't really have like super impressive wins. They beat Cincinnati. They beat at Kansas State. But look at this. This is fascinating. So LSU had that brutal schedule. Arkansas might be the team that jumps out to the SEC lead because their start is at Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, at Texas A&M, Missouri, at LSU, South Carolina, Texas A&M, at Ole Miss, at Georgia versus Mississippi State. Like,
only one team in the first like 10 games that feels like they won't be a favorite against.
So, but you know what that means coming down the pike to finish the season. Auburn at home, at Alabama, at Missouri, Tennessee at home, at Florida, Kentucky, LSU at home, at Tennessee. Like they finish like, so if they get upset a few times early in the season, conference play, that'll be really good for everybody but they could easily be the team that's 8-2 in first place halfway through the conference schedule.
And they fall apart down the stretch, hopefully, while we're building steam with our depth and everything. We're hoping that's a thing. But
hopefully so. I think Musselman's a good coach. I think they're building something there. They care more. They actually do care more about basketball than football there because of the history. I worry that I hope I'm wrong. I hope they, can't handle. I hope they're not that good this year, but
I think we've seen a lot of teams though over the years. It's really hard to do it twice in a row, and that's another impressive thing about Bruce, to keep these teams going. We've seen how hard it is to make the SEC or the NCAA tournament like 5 years in a row or 4 years in a row. That stat we've been throwing around. So let's just give him another year. If he goes another year the way they did last year, where they play really well in the SEC and then go deep in the tournament, I'll give him credit. I'll do it. But we've just seen so many teams like have their big year and then it fades, and then we like forget that we hyped them up so much.
Yeah. Anything else on them?
No.
All right. Alabama was picked second in the league. We're our two favorite teams. Alabama and Kentucky are left. So Alabama had a really good team last year. They won the SEC regular season. They won the SEC tournament, which really stunk for us because they kind of matched. We had done those things in the last years previously to that. But the one thing they did not do is make the Final Four. They made the Sweet 16 and lost to a play-in team.
Thank God they lost to this stuff, because it was already brutal. Like you said, they won the SEC stuff. Another thing that really frustrates me with Bama is one, like, it just seems like these teams, man, they have these years and they get crowned, like same with Arkansas and Tennessee. They have 1 year and they get crowned like they're like the future that'll never get stopped again. And it feels like it takes so much more for us to get that same reputation. But they had a weird year. It was 2020, COVID year, no fans in the stands, or like less fans in the stands. We had a really tough time. I feel like a lot of big programs had tough times with bringing in freshmen. Like if you were putting your roster around freshmen or run and dones or transfers, you had a really hard time because the practice schedules were messed up. The whole lifestyle of the team was messed up. You missed out on your home field advantage kind of stuff. They came in with a very senior laden team that had a lot of experience, and it really felt like they kept it together throughout that entire year. And that's how they end up winning everything. And I think like that's underrated because they want to talk about Nate Oates and the recruiting, which is really frustrating. But it came down a lot that it just lucked out that they had their senior laden team during that year.
They were really good. Herb Jones has been hard for them to replace. He was, I believe, SEC Player of the Year. And they've been up and down. They've probably been the most Jekyll and Hyde team this year so far. They have great wins. They beat Gonzaga and Houston back to back, who are both like top 15 teams nationally. But they lost to Iona. They lost to Memphis on the road by 14, and they lost to Davidson in a kind of quickly thrown together due to COVID game this week. So they're 9-3. They have been in the top 10 all year. They probably won't be going into SEC play. And Oates plays a similar offensive style to Bruce, which I really hate. I hate that we don't have like an advantage there where a lot of teams we play, we have this stylistic advantage. And they're recruiting really well. They have a guy, J.D. Davison, who, kind of knew was going to Bama probably, but he kind of strung Auburn out. Their best player.
They have the craziest hair at Bama, man. They went from a guy, what was that guy's name? Had the insane hair, just like frustrating to watch. I know it's like one thing for John. Was it
John Petty?
John Petty, man. I know it's like weird for two white guys to talk about black guys' hairs. Like I don't want to get too deep in it, but it was ugly as shit. It was like, sorry, you cussed in there, but it was look like Crabman from My Name Is Earl. I made fun of it for years. And then J.D. Davis come in. I sent you, I think, a stat about it. He hasn't cut his hair since second grade. Is that right? And then it just looks super dumb, like a Super Saiyan style hair thing on. We wanted him on the team at one point. I think we backed off a lot of recruiting. Some of the most frustrating, same thing with Georgia, same thing with Bama, same thing with a lot of these state schools. Even if they weren't great, like even when Bama's been bad, they grab a player or two that they don't deserve really because they're, say, Alabama on the front of their jersey and the kid's from Alabama, and there's stuff going on with rec. And I know we put on our little moniker. I said, no filter on here. They're cheating. They have their little thing set up. And it really feels like with this higher Nate Oates and the way the SEC's turned in, they've really turned up their bagman game and everything from football. And then they said, we didn't care about basketball. And they're going, all right, we're going to invest in the coach and we're going to invest in the recruiting side of this too, if you know what I mean. And it really feels like they've turned it up.
Well, for me, I always tell people when Alabama basketball started getting 5-star guys from Canada, Josh Primo, it seems like something's going on. So they are good. But here's the thing. They probably, for the last couple of years, have had more recruiting talent than us on their roster. And I don't get the sense that they maximize that necessarily. And I do feel like Bruce does. We did lose to them both times, I believe, last year. Last year was kind of a lost season in a lot of ways for Auburn. A lot of pressure. Michael mentioned that. A lot of excitement and hype for that. Obviously, we played them twice. They're the last team on this list that we play both times. And I think we play in Tuscaloosa first. So what an opportunity if we could go in there and beat them in their place and still have the home game coming back. It's important in the state right now because there really is a tug of war for power there. And I think we're up to the challenge. Ideally we beat them both times, but if we could split with them and be competing for that SEC title, I think that would go a long way.
That's kind of what I predict is going to end up happening this year, which is frustrating, is we'll probably split the series. We'll probably lose away with some weird whistles and some bad shooting and different things. They always seem to give us their best game. John Petty always seemed to go off for 30 points against us, and while he looked frustrating on the other games and mediocre in other games, he always went off against us. Their shooting always seemed to be higher percentage against us. But I think we'll win at home. We'll lose away, and then I'm hoping in the SEC tournament we play them again and win the series 2-1. That's kind of what I envision, that we'll peak at the right time, and that some of these players, it's frustrating. It's the fourth game, I think. I'm hoping by then Flanagan's back to 100%. I'm thinking that's about the time he'll start really being 100%, but it might still take some time to gel. And I think you'd rather play them at the end of the year than the beginning of the year. You told that power struggle as part of the thing with recruiting. And the way, I said, they always seem to get some of these big time recruits out of the state, even when they didn't deserve it, even when they really sucked. They still have this, there's certain kids, you get the vibe, their family needs some help. They're the other teams want them, but then you see like other big teams like kind of like whispering on their message boards and stuff like, yeah, don't even worry about this kid. He's got connections like with Bama, and you're like, what is going on? And so it's really frustrating power wise that I felt like we were right there with being so dominant in the state with our program that Alabama sucked and Auburn is legit like a national title contender. We can finally start pulling even that last like bit of recruiting kids that have those like weird uncle connections with Alabama or whatever. We were finally coming over the hump where it was like, okay, even those kids can turn down the bag man or the connections or the whole family telling them they're dumb because they know it's legit that much better at Auburn. Now they're back to being like, no, you can win at either place. Like, and on top of that, your whole family's not going to disown you for going to Alabama. So you're going to Alabama,
Yeah, there's a lot of that. We know that tale as old as time.
And we can talk about that on this kind of podcast, I feel like, and I'm not going to hold back on that kind of stuff. If we were beat writers, if we were actually connected to the team in any way, I wouldn't bring up these, like, it sounds like conspiracy theories. If you're deep into Auburn sports, you wonder how much is real conspiracy theories. You've seen enough, like, it's almost like a science experiment. You've seen the results enough that there's something acting on the other side. Yeah.
That's how I always tell people, like, you can say from the outside it's conspiracy or whatever, like you're not paying attention to it, and it goes on. Yeah. And Bruce, to his credit, has done a really, really good job of not using that as an excuse and just, hey, I'm going to go get talent in Georgia and I'm going to go to other places and I'm going to, get on these kids early who maybe aren't as highly recruited and see the future a little bit. And like, he's kind of built his own ecosystem because you're right. But it's always been like that. I mean, it probably always will be, unfortunately. So again,
it felt like we were right there though, didn't it? Where it's like,
did.
nah, if you're a basketball player in the state, you're going to Auburn. And it just felt like we just lost it by like 1 year.
Bruce really pushed them to, in the same way that Tuberville winning 6 in a row in the Iron Bowl, pushed Alabama a little bit, where they were like, all right, we're going to do something, a little more intense here, even though they wanted to hire Rich Rod.
So frustrating that we've talked about 1,000 times that they start caring because we started caring, and it's just like, screw you guys.
I did want to say Jaden Shackelford's a really good guard for them who can fill it up. He can shoot. He's 4th in the SEC in scoring points per game right now. They're a good team. Can't really, excited to see those two. I think, a lot of people think both Auburn and Alabama could be the 2 best teams in the league right now. So
they got 2 guys in the first team preseason All-SC, that Shackelford guy and then another guy named Javon Quinterly. I don't know much about him.
Yeah, Quinterly's good.
I've watched some of their stuff. I wish I watched more because if you look at their schedule again, it's been really wacky. So it's hard to tell. Like, I want to like call them out on not being that great or whatever, but they keep going back and forth. They lose to someone like Iona and you make fun of. I know that's Pitino's team, but it was still like, come on, it's Iona. They have not gotten the talent together they should for a team that's claiming to be top 10. They lost to Memphis. They lost to Davidson. People are trying to give Memphis like a little bit of a pass because they have a lot of talent. Memphis is really bad this year. They've lost some really bad games. It's an embarrassing loss. I think Georgia beat Memphis maybe.
Georgia and Ole Miss both beat Memphis.
And they're awful. Ole Miss lost to Samford. Georgia's lost to some insane teams. So like that's where it's at. But then they go out and they beat Houston at home, which is dubious, which they're going to get this number 14 win against Houston. But there was a goaltend at the end of the game they didn't call, and Houston went really nuts. And there's like now an infamous gif of Nate Oates trying to shake hands with the guy like a petty guy that he is. He's like trying to be like, game's over, while the Houston guys are like, no, this needs to be reviewed. But they legally, like by the rules, could not review goaltending without calling it or something. And everyone says like, I don't know, man, maybe I'm biased or whatever. I thought it was goaltending. All the announcers were like, it's 50-50, it feels like, and they couldn't review it for rule reasons. So that's frustrating. But then they also beat Gonzaga, which is a huge win. Gonzaga's really good this year. They've lost 2, I think, now Gonzaga has. So they might not be like the unanimous number 1 team, but it's still a really great win. And then, so that's their 2 big ones, right? They beat anybody else. Either way, beating Houston and Gonzaga are pretty big. And I really hope they were more of the lose to Davidson, Iona. Who else did lose to? Memphis kind of team, and not the kind of team that also beats Gonzaga and Houston. So we'll see like what the real Jekyll and Hyde Alabama is come SEC play.
Yep. And if you're looking for bright spot, if you're a Auburn fan or something, hoping they don't do well, their last 3 games they lost to Memphis, they barely beat Jacksonville State in a home close game, and then they lost to Davidson in Birmingham. So Like they're not on a lot of momentum right now, and then they got to go. They open with Tennessee, like we mentioned earlier. So
I think it's official. I'm going to be cheering for Tennessee in that Bama game
me too.
because I think because I go back and forth because we might look up come the end of the year and Tennessee's got one more win on us and they win the SEC or something. It'd be frustrating. But I think if Bama can lose that Tennessee game, they might start questioning how good they really are by then, losing that like 3 out of 4 games.
All right, Kentucky shockingly picked to win the SEC this year. Another loaded team with talent. They have lost twice. They lost to Duke in the season opener by 8. They lost to Notre Dame at Notre Dame, and that Notre Dame team is not considered that good. They killed North Carolina recently. They killed Western Kentucky last night. They have some other, they've kind of done their business against lesser teams along the way. But I think the big story with them has to be their big guy, Oscar Tshiebwe. Man, we need Jay Phillips on here saying his name all the time. He is a monster. We talked about it at the beginning of this in the preview with him. He's averaging 15.5 rebounds per game. He had 28 last night. He is a monster. If you haven't watched him, check him out. He's also leading the league in field goal percentage because he's massive, 65%. The other guy for them, you might remember from Georgia, Severe Wheeler, who again transferred away from Georgia. He's now the point guard at Kentucky. He leads the league in assists per game. And then they have a lot of other younger players too who are super talented. So what are your thoughts?
You'll be frustrated if you're a Georgia fan or a Tom Crean guy. They had some talent they brought in, and then they lost it all in a year to these transfers. And that's like good. It ended up being good for us. It's probably bad for the sport that you can kind of try to start building a program. And maybe Tom Crean could have really actually turned it around this year with some of that talent on the team, but he's lost all of it to transfers, which is part of the game now, is keeping your transfers. But Kentucky's always tough. My big thing is that big guy, Oscar Tshiebwe, I believe is pronounced correctly. Maybe, I don't know. But anyways, he's killing it. He's going to get every foul call in our game. I guarantee it. Me and Matt have joked about this for years. I really hope a beat writer or somebody, or maybe us, will go in. I would love to see how many more fouls per game on average we have against Kentucky. You can argue that maybe because they're a better team, that they're going to have more fouls or whatever called on them because people are trying to stop them. But every year we play them, it is the most frustrating game to watch. Every year we have foul trouble with our centers and our forwards. And this year, I think it's going to be no different. I think it'll be one of my preseason notes, actually, to like do predictions. We're going to have foul trouble against Kentucky. Walker Kessler's been playing so great, getting so many blocks. He's going to have a hard time, I think, in this game. I think we saw when we played UConn how much he got pushed around. You hope he's developed a little more since then. But it might be a game where you see stretch, because we're going to have 5 fouls on Kessler and 5 fouls on Cardwell and 5 fouls on Stretch and 5 fouls. It's just going to be frustrating. It always is.
I forgot to mention, by the way, Arkansas, we only play once on the road, which is another historically Bud Walton Arena, very challenging. Kentucky, we play at home only once, which is great. CBS is going to have that game on a Saturday. It's an all Auburn, all orange game. It's going to be the whole jungle Bruce Pearl effect. That'll be a big Saturday game for us. Kentucky is interesting because they obviously recruit and have the pedigree, and Cal is, a good coach. But man, they haven't had the big time success in the conference that they're used to having. They haven't had the big time success in the tournament over the last 5-10 years as like they're used to having. So I find them really interesting. They have some Monstar players of their own. We always talk about Auburn having some pretty freakish players. They have some as well. Really curious to see how this Kentucky team, they are playing much better the last couple at least, it seems like. And their schedule's a little soft early. They could be the team with Arkansas as well that kind of jumps out a little bit.
Who is High Point? How are they playing their first conference game and then playing some team called High Point?
New Year's Eve hoops.
What is that? Who is High Point? How are what is that?
High Point is a team in the Big South.
Is this a high school? Is this a high school team? Is this the local high school in Lexington, Kentucky? We play some bad teams. Every year I did my funny Billikens thing in St. Louis, but You know who St. Louis is. You know who most of these teams are. I'm a huge college sports fan. I'm sure you are too. We used to play like NCAA football back in the day when they used to have every team on there. High Point. Who's High Point?
In North Carolina, apparently. Who knew?
I don't know. That'll be hopefully they'll get upset by High Point. We can talk about it all day long, like they did with that team
Yeah.
at Evansville, which I didn't know who Evansville was either. So I'm,
So
I'm looking at their Wikipedia page over here, and you're talking about how they haven't had the success they planned on in the last like so many years. Last time they went to Final Four was 2015. They did go to Elite Eight in 2019 against us in 2017.
yeah,
You're right. With the reputation they have, and the reputation Calipari gets in a lifetime contract and all that kind of stuff. It's been 6 years since they had like this success they almost expect. So give that another year or two, they're going to get frustrated over there.
that's another team stylistically though that it's a great matchup for Bruce and Auburn. Like they play tight, they play slower, they play possession by possession. Super athletic, foul disparity sometimes. They do attack the basket ruthlessly. They will. You're right. They get a lot of calls, but they also just as part of who they are. As part of who Cal is. Tony Barbie tried to do that with not great athletes at Auburn, and it didn't work. But when you have the best players who can get by people, it's not a bad way to play. I just think it plays into our
foul. And it's big time. It's just like with KD. When you're getting your foul calls when you're driving the ball, it changes the game completely. You don't have to make every field goal. You can make every other one and still look amazing.
Right. So what do you think? Like, how many years in a row have we beaten Kentucky? At least
I was about to say, I was going to ask you what the stat is on. There's been a stat we were throwing around in the offseason, I think, where we're leading the series in the last 5 years or something like that. Or we're tied up in the last 5 years or something. I don't know if we have that anywhere.
I'm gonna look it up, but
if we don't know that stat, that's not great though, because this is the kind of stuff that needs to get out there. Is like when we have these kind of series, like they're doing a really good job of talking about how we've got more wins in the last 5 years than any other SEC team. But if you go back to like that Cream Canty win at home that broke the series of like 18 losses on a road to Kentucky or something, we're doing really well.
Yeah, we got that one in 2016. Lost in 2017. In 2018, beat them at home. 2018 lost. So I guess we did. I thought we had beaten them. Maybe it's at home. I don't remember.
We still have a pretty good record there. If we go back to, if you start it the other way in 2021, and go win, loss, win, loss, loss, win, win. That's tied up series going back to 2019, I guess. And there's another loss win. So then I guess this is Kentucky's website. Sorry. So the way it was even. It's even back to 2015, 2016.
And I think we've won 4 of the last 5 at home. We lost that one with the Final Four team where they were down 20 and almost came back and won. And Harper barely missed a shot. Yeah.
Another big time. Every one of our centers was fouled out by the end of the game kind of game. Super frustrating.
So anyway, sorry.
Another thing about Kentucky that's annoying to me. So you talked about how we're going to play that game on CBS at home. It's big for us to be on national TV. I mean, part of it, we're newish, but we do have a big fan base it's kind of coming over from football. And we're very loyal. Kentucky, you're always going to get beat out by Kentucky by fan base and like the national TV and stuff. It can be really frustrating that in college basketball, apparently they pick like the dates and times and even TV networks at the beginning of the year, not even the beginning of the SEC conference play. They pick it before the college basketball season even starts. So that's how you end up with a top 20 ranked Auburn LSU game on ESPNU. And so it does matter when we get frustrated about the hype coming into the seasons and stuff like that. It matters because if we were getting the same hype as Arkansas or the same hype as Tennessee or something like that, we get this game on ESPN, and it matters in the long run, this kind of stuff. And so it's kind of frustrating sometimes when this Kentucky game's on CBS and we don't get any other games. We might have another game or two like that's could theoretically be top 10 matchups, and we might have it on ESPN or ESPN2. I think they might have some leadway to move it around if it's like they have a couple SEC games on ESPN, but it doesn't seem like they do it very often. Once it's set to be SEC network, they usually keep it there. So we might have like a top 10 matchup one day on SEC network while Kentucky's playing. Kentucky loses a game or two here or there, and they're top 15 playing against a mediocre like Arkansas team or something else that's fallen out of the rankings, they're still going to get that CBS game. They're still going to get watched by way more people because that's just how they do the TV schedule. And we'll have to build our reputation, but it just feels like we're always like having to work 10 times harder than other programs to get that same like level of respect.
Yeah, we believe in work, hard work. That's why we got to do it. We got to take down the evil empires of the day. Well, I don't have much on Kentucky. They're really good. I sense that a lot of teams, though, at the top half of the league can beat Kentucky on a given day. And I think I really think overall, I think the league is really wide open. And I could give you, it would not shock me for any of the top 6 or 7 teams to win it. It really wouldn't.
Yeah, you're right. I think it could be wide open. Let's look at Auburn's schedule real quick. I'd like to see who we play second or first, or like how many. Like I was going to get you to show.
Hang on.
It kind of comes down to what teams you play twice, what teams you only play away, what teams you only play at home. Like it's frustrating. We played Tennessee one time. If it ends up coming down like it did in that SEC regular season championship year, that the one game we got to play against Tennessee was away. It was good that we got that away win because it's a big deal. It's going to be really frustrating if we tie them and their one win is a close win at Tennessee when you really feel like we could win at home. And so you kind of look at the schedule to that light a little bit.
I don't know if you can see. Can you see these?
Scroll up a little bit. Right there.
Got that? I don't know if that's easier or this scroll down is easier. Is this easier?
I think the other one's better.
Okay.
We'll have to verbalize it since we're a podcast. I think we're going to put this one up on YouTube, but
so
play.
You got LSU, which we talked about. You go at South Carolina, Florida at home, at Alabama, at Ole Miss.
That could be a tough stretch right there. If we
I would say
one to Alabama and then lose one to a frustrating Ole Miss, it could be one of our little like moments where we have to keep the team in a jailed position,
And just the first 4 playing LSU, Florida, and Alabama. I mean that's you want to get out of the gate okay and not hurt yourself too bad if you're going to be chasing the title. You don't want to have 2 or 3 losses in the first 4 or 5 games. Georgia at home, Kentucky at home, at Missouri.
You think we'll get game day? You think we'll get game day again on that Kentucky one? It was so cool to see us on game day, and we made such a big deal. And Bruce does a great job of like highlighting like how that kind of stuff and getting everyone's really rallied around it. And it's great hearing. I don't really watch college game day, like especially not basketball very often, but it's still, there is a certain amount of people that do it. And it's like a moniker of success,
Well, it's definitely our only chance for a Saturday big home game that could potentially get it. I just wonder if they would do that again. 2 years ago, they went for that game too.
There's a couple that could end up being big, but it would have the other teams. Like I think our team's headed in the right direction to do this, but like I guess it's at Arkansas, so that doesn't really work. But
yeah.
Kentucky, maybe you're right. Looking down the schedule, there's not one more other top 10.
Tennessee, but that's on the road. Tennessee could be potentially.
A lot of our big matchups at home are during the week.
Yep.
That Alabama during the week game.
Yep. Don't forget about the Oklahoma SEC Big 12 Challenge. Auburn will play Oklahoma kind of, halfway through the conference schedule there, but right before we host Alabama. So that's 2 really kind of cool home games back to back on a Saturday and a Tuesday.
Lucky we got that at Baylor in last year. I know like a team this good, you want to have big time games, but I would love to play at Baylor this year, but I would want to play in that conference. It'd be really frustrating to have this hard of a conference schedule and then have to play at Baylor in the middle of that. So we're lucky that we in a year that we think we could do something special to get Oklahoma at home instead of a tougher team away.
Yeah. After the big Alabama game, got back-to-back road trips at Georgia, at Arkansas. Really makes that Georgia game important. You don't want to have to go to Arkansas, heaven forbid, coming off a loss to Alabama and then losing to Georgia somehow on the road. Like that could
at that point we are reevaluating the season,
real fast. But then you come home for A&M and Vanderbilt, a good week-long home stretch there. At Florida has always historically given us fits. We haven't been down there a ton though.
So we don't play at Texas A&M, right? This Texas A&M at home is the only one. All right, that's probably good because, like you said, that's one of those teams that's like we should beat them, but they could be the kind of loss you get away that you understand, but you wish you could avoid.
Yeah. And then it's just Ole Miss at Tennessee is a huge game. And then at Mississippi State, South Carolina to end. Overall, our schedule is very balanced. You know, we saw some other teams as we were looking through where, man, they have a 2 or 3 week stretch where it's just gauntlet. And I like our schedule. You know, the thing I would point out, if we go back to the poll,
That at Tennessee game can be huge.
Could be huge.
If the season goes the way we think it's going to go, or we hope it can go, that at Tennessee Knoxville game could be the thing. Like we might have to finish up the next 2 games, but it'll be the direction we go. I don't know how their last games go. I'd love to see their schedule because it could be when we're really like circling. You're going, Michael's going. You know, I don't know what. I'm sure tickets are already pretty expensive, but if you're an Auburn fan, it might be a game to think about making a road trip for.
And I'll just say it's not that expensive. It's a bigger arena there. You know, they have more tickets, and it's very affordable if you don't mind sitting, you know, upper deck, but maybe lower part of the upper deck. You can have a decent seat for that game. You know, you play 5 teams twice.
Man, you can get a $37 ticket.
That's what I said. Plus fees. Yep.
Yeah, plus fees, which I mean, I guess that's all it is. You can get $37 ticket to this Knoxville game and see a number 1, hopefully pick in Jabari Smith, or at least a guy that's going to play a lot of years in the NBA. It could be a huge game. You could have you could theoretically, hopefully, maybe see Cambridge dunk on Justin Powell. So that's worth the ticket right there. That's probably worth $100 if you can see that one in person. So go ahead, get that ticket and make that road trip if you can.
Why do you think I'm going? I would also throw out there Athens. You can get $20 tickets in Athens right now, you know, online. So that's a Saturday game as well. Both of those games are kind of midday, I think. So it's easy to, you know, make a trip if you're in the Southeast. Just hop in the car and go watch some Auburn basketball. I did want to point out that overall, this is one of the nicer schedules Auburn's gotten in the last few years. You play 5 teams twice. 4 of the teams Auburn plays twice are 7th or below in the preseason poll. And Alabama's the only one we do, and we play them twice every year. So you're only playing Kentucky once, Arkansas once, Tennessee once, LSU once. That's massive, and not all those other teams can say that about each other, you know. So I do think there is some advantage there for Auburn, and I hope they can take advantage of it.
It helps that we get the Mississippi school, Ole Miss, back to back every year, and Georgia. And I was going to say Ole Miss, man.
It does help.
Georgia is huge that we get them as our doubled up team every year, so that helps. It sucks that Alabama's gotten really good on the double up year, but we got lucky some years with having Kentucky at home by themselves without having to go back. That's pretty big. We've kind of gone through all this preseason stuff now and kind of giving you the narratives for each one of these teams. You know, come closer to the games, we might try to do a little more deeper dive on some of this stuff. We'll learn a lot more during the season, I'm sure, casually just watching around, and we'll hopefully do some around the SEC stuff at the end of podcast. Maybe we want to keep the weekly ones a little shorter, but maybe on Saturdays we'll do a wrap up of SEC stuff for everybody. Another fun thing we wanted to do during this SEC preview is kind of give some predictions a little bit, not necessarily predictions. Neither me or Matt like to do score predictions or even who's going to be the MVP or whatever. We like to go hyper specific on our predictions. We had a little tougher time. We do this in some other sports sometimes, but we both kind of came up with a couple things, and we can go through them here. It'll be interesting to see if they're correct at the end of the year. The part of the reason it was so difficult to do some of these was now that we're halfway through the season, it's a little when there's lots more unknowns to start the season, it's a little easier to kind of make some predictions. Now that we have some pretty solid evidence on different things, it's a little harder to make a wild assumption without just being Jabari Smith's going to be really good, and he's going to have a game where he goes off super hard. It's of course he is. We've seen that he can do that, But if we had made that prediction before the season, it would have been a little more spicy, Yeah.
So you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll let you do one first.
All right. Which one do I want to start with? I'm going to go bottom to top here. Okay. I think that Auburn is a little stat nerd thing. I think Auburn can average a 3 turnover advantage per game in SEC play. So, on average, forcing 3 more turnovers than the other team. Obviously, that's if you just look at that stat, 3 more possessions potentially. Not only do you get extra possessions, but you take away theirs. That can be the difference in a lot of these close games. Auburn has shown that throughout the non-conference play. They've been really good at rebounding margin for the most part and turnover margin. I think that can continue. And 3 per game may not sound like a lot, but on average, through an 18-game schedule, that would be a really good thing for this team if they could pull that off.
Do you know what we're averaging right now in a conference?
I think it
Give us a
is.
sense or what other teams are averaging. I don't even I know we're always trying to win the turnover battle, and that's kind of part of Bruce's offense and defense, that we're always trying to get those turnovers and fast break points. But I'd love for reference. Are you shooting your
I'm on
home run here, or is this a very mild take?
Well, the reason I settled on 3 is obviously a lot of teams are so much better. I'm going to do the math right now on where we're at, but
you wish you could put this in Excel.
You go ahead and give yours.
We'll go ahead and get into mine. Yeah, I hope we win the turnover battle and stuff like that. I think we could do even better than that, but I don't know what our usual plus minus is. My big one to start, and I kind of going down from ones I feel good about / feel like they fit this prediction, is that I think there's still one starting lineup change left besides the Flanagan one. I think we know Flanagan's going to come in and take over that 3 position over Cambridge. But I think after that, we still have a lineup change in there somewhere. We just have too many good players. We're still learning a lot. I think the element of bringing Flanagan in is also going to change up some things. And I think in the past, Matt's talked about this. He really doesn't like changing up these lineups. But I think when you have the excuse already that Flanagan's coming in, and I'm not calling out KD or Wendell or Zepp necessarily, but I think one of those 3, they're going to have some change up in there come SEC play when they realize that now that Flanagan's in and we have an extra ball carrier there, a guy that can drive a little more, it might be a more ambitious or more lineup that can do better for us if we change it up a little bit. I don't know who that'll be, if it'll be Wendell coming back in and Zepp coming out, KD coming in, Wendell coming in, how they're going to change all that around. But I really feel like halfway through SEC play, there'll be a moment where they try out a different starting lineup.
I would agree with that. I think the Wendell, KD, Zepp thing is interesting to watch. I think the Flanagan could come in for KD and start. He could come in for Cambridge and start.
Here's a lineup that could be interesting that we could see at some point, depending on who we're playing. You could see a Kessler, Jalen Williams, Jabari Smith, Flanagan, Wendell, or Zepp. You could see them go that's not that ridiculous, right? Because Flanagan was proved last year he's a really good ball handler. There might be a time where we decide the 2 is the really weak position and we can move Jabari down. I know we've been we don't want to play Jabari at the 3. I think it might even be part of his recruiting that we wouldn't play him too low. But if it gets a little struggle in there and we decide that the 2 is the real weakness, but we want to play all these other guys, then you never know.
The big key would be Jabari just getting minutes and reps on the wing. 2 and 3 are very similar. You can kind of interchange. I haven't seen him do. I've been maybe even once. I want to say maybe we saw it once. Maybe not.
We saw that UConn come back. They played Jalen. It wasn't with Kessler. It was Jalen, Jabari. I don't know who else was in there, but they changed it up.
Well, that's one of mine that I'm not going to use. It's not one of my better ones. I've said before, I do think Jalen's going to close out some games at center when you want a more mobile presence and put him and Jabari in there together. I think that's fascinating. I agree with you. I do think it'll change one more time, whether that's point guard, Flanagan, KD. It could be a lot of different directions. I do think it will change. I think that's a good
and the word I was trying to look for, I think they could still they're going to look at this new lineup with Flanagan in and decide that there might be a slightly better way to maximize the talent on the team and move some guys around.
I got my number, by the way. Auburn is averaging plus 5.9 turnovers per game in non-conference play.
Okay. And we feel like we're doing really well with that right now. So maybe 3 is a good drawback.
I think 3 is a good number. If you could average that, that would be great. My next one is, I predict that I'm not a big results guy, but I think this shows some confidence. Auburn is picked 5th. I think Auburn will finish in the top 4 and get a double bye in the SEC tournament. I think that is kind of what should be expected with this team. It's going to be challenging. There's going to be a lot of hard games, but I really think people are going to beat up on each other. And I think that's kind of a good goal. Obviously, they're going to try to win the SEC with everything they've got. But I feel somewhat comfortable watching what's happened so far this year that they could be a top 4 team, get the double bye in the SEC tournament because, we want to win the league. But, if you don't win the league, if you finish second or third, well, now you can go after the SEC tournament and try to win that for the second time in, 3 tournaments. That would be great.
It's fun that you have 2 chances there, really, that you could lose the regular season and still feel really good about your season winning the SEC tournament or vice versa,
Or getting a really good seed, or just getting a
Yeah.
great seed in the NCAA tournament. Right now, Auburn's probably in that 2 to 3 seed range, which is fantastic.
Yeah. We've basically seen both, where we had a year where we were clearly the best team in the SEC, but then we had some injuries and we really struggled down the stretch and we sealed it and we got that ring. And then we lost in the tournament because we just knew that that team was down. And it was a good thing that we were able to build that lead during the season. The next year we knew we had such a talented team and just struggled at times. We won the tournament. So we got to get those rings in 2 different years. So you hope that this team can do one or the other. You're predicting that we get that double bye, which puts us in the kind of position we need to be. You hope that double bye is either from winning the whole thing or we take advantage of it. This year can be successful. Maybe there's too high of expectations, but this year can be really successful in 3 different ways, really. You can win the SEC regular season and you don't win the SEC tournament and we go out in the second or third round in the NCAA and you still feel pretty good about this team. You win the SEC tournament and you don't do great on the other 2 necessarily, as long as it's not embarrassing, then that's another great one. You go, even if you don't win the SEC tournament, you don't win the SEC regular season, maybe somebody just turns out to be dominant, another team just turns out to be completely dominant, but then you go deep in this tournament, you're good again. So it's nice that we have I think this team, maybe that'll be part of my predictions. This team's going to do one of those 3.
Okay. I would love it. Anytime you can do one of those 3, that's a successful season. I think you have to define success.
My other one I actually wrote down because I want to do these hyper-focused ones,
Yeah.
I think Walker Kessler is going to lead the SEC in blocks. I think we've already seen that he's just insanely good at it. He's already leading the nation in blocks right now. So I think Walker Kessler is going to lead the SEC in blocks, but he's going to foul out against Kentucky. I think he's really going to struggle against that other guy. We saw him struggling against the UConn guy that could push him around. And we saw how many years in a row that I've been harping on it because we just got done talking about Kentucky, that we get in all this foul trouble. It's going to be really frustrating. I think it's been great to have a guy leading the SEC in blocks, but also it's going to be frustrating to watch him get foul calls on blocks that usually don't get a foul call on.
Fair. And that can happen in any game. I mean, you're right with the bigger guys, it happens more frequently, but refs are very different game to game. It's one of the frustrating parts about basketball. And if you get caught with a couple early fouls, that can really change the dynamics of a game. I have one related to Jabari, his frontline running mate. I think this is a significant one. You might think this is lame and weak, but
I might have the same one on my list. I'll be curious to see the same one or not.
Okay, yeah, we didn't talk about this. I have Jabari having a higher scoring average in SEC play than he did in non-conference play.
Okay, not the same one, but I like that thought. That's very interesting that you think he can turn it up to another notch, because that's what it's going to be, between him being a very good top 5 player to being an all-time great style. If he can turn it to the next level come SEC play. Because mine is, and this is one of my lamer ones or whatever, like you were talking about. I don't think that's that lame. I think it's not usually likely that happens, that a player turns it up after, but I guess a play like this does. I have that Jabari still due for a Superman game, the kind of game where he's just unstoppable, and we decided to just feed him. We decided nah, you're going to play more minutes. You're going to stay in because you're just so hot right now. They can't stop you. I was hoping we'd get that in the out of conference, because it makes it a little more likely that if we could have gotten it out of conference that he's due for 1 or 2 in the SEC. I still think I don't know what game it'll be. I don't know what the matchup will be. I don't know if it's a close game and that's why he gets fed. I don't know if it's a blowout and that's why he gets fed or what. But at least one game this year, he's going to go off for 25 plus 10 rebounds, bunch of steals, or 30 points. And it'll be the kind of game where the other team's just what do we even do? He gets the ball in his hands and the ball goes in, and that's all you can do,
It's a great one. I hope that happens. It's like the old when Chuma got hot, the big Chum games. He went big Chum a couple times. We wish it could have been a couple more times than it was, but yeah, you want to feel like you're getting. And I think that'll happen. I agree.
I think part of it comes down to too that there are so many good guys on this team that he has to pass the ball around and share the ball. I think there'll be a game, either through injury or just that he's so hot that Bruce tells the team, like, Jabari is going off, get the ball to Jabari. And you see some, like, a couple, like, all it takes is a couple possessions where we usually have somebody else take it and they force the issue to Jabari, but because he's so hot, he makes it happen. That turns the game completely on its head, you know?
Wendell Green said last night, that's kind of the culture of this team. Like, we don't really care. Like, whoever, like, different people are going to be hot different nights. We don't really care who it is. Like, everybody's going to get their run. And we've seen that. I mean, throughout this non-conference play so far, like, sometimes it's Wendell, sometimes it's Walker, sometimes it's Jabari, sometimes Flanagan is going to pop in and have his moments where, you know, he looks really good. Like, and that's, as long as Bruce said that last night too, as long as our team has that mindset, you know, the sky's the limit, you know, because if people don't get selfish about their own numbers or their own success, then you open the door. So I think we have a team and a coach that has produced a culture that will allow that. Like, I think there will be a couple games where Jabari is that guy.
I'll do my next one here. I think you have maybe one less than mine, but
I'm done.
That's it. Okay, so I got two other ones, and one I feel more strongly about than the other, but this one I feel more strongly about than the next one. Lior Berman's role is going to shrink a lot in SEC play to the point where at the end of SEC play, the last 2 or 3 games, he's just not going to play at all. Like right now, he's playing some decent minutes. I think we started off the season him playing some decent minutes, but I think the big difference is come SEC play, we're playing better athletes. His game's really going to shrink down. They're going to want to play him for 10 or 11 games, and come the last 3 or 4 games, you're going to look up and we're going to be looking at the stat sheet and say, wow, Lior just didn't even play this game at all. He didn't even like get in, because I think for these first couple of games, they're going to play him the way they were playing him previously. Like I don't know how many he's actually averaging, like 5 to 10 minutes or whatever. And they're going to keep playing that same role for the first like 4 or 5 games. And then he's going to like shrink to like 1 possession in the first half, because they're like adamant they're going to play 10 or 11 guys, but they don't play him in the second half. And by the last like 4 or 5 games, he just legit is not playing at all. And I think it's just going to be the difference between SEC athletes and these out-of-conference athletes. And I hope that he sticks around or gets a good team next year. But I just think that's going to shrink. You might even see, what's his name? I can't believe I'm blanking on his name again. The bigger Chris Moore.
Chris Moore,
yeah. He might even see more playing time at the end of the season than Lior is, even though Lior's dominating his minutes right now, because the difference in athleticism might show up. And then like when we need that depth, they might throw Chris Moore in when they would have thrown Lior against some less athletic teams.
Yeah, one of the more interesting things is the race for that 10th spot. I mean, it's Lior and Chris Moore right now competing behind Cambridge, and how Flanagan coming back impacts that. Bruce can play 9. He wants to at least play 9. So theoretically, they could not play Lior or Chris Moore and just run with
I think it'll be more like that.
Yeah, and it could be, but he's really this year, maybe it's just non-conference, like you said. He's been playing 10 every game, and Lior got the minutes last night. It could be Chris Moore. And maybe it will go.
He's averaging 11 minutes per game. Is that what I'm looking at?
Yeah, 11.8 minutes per game. Chris Moore's at 12.2 so far. So, and Cardwell's 11.7. So he's actually slightly ahead of Cardwell.
Lior's had some times where they left him in there for a while. So I don't think like every game he does. He just has a couple of games that prior outliers on there.
You realize he's 8 for 12 from 3 for the year. He's shooting 67%.
I just think like he's like, man, he's blown me away with how much he's done in the out of conference, and I love it. And I think the fans have really embraced it and stuff. I just think there's going to be this drop off come SEC play, that the size and the speed just don't work the way they did before. And his moments he's having now are just not going to work out for him. And I think he had his opportunity in 1 or 2 games to really earn those minutes even more. He's already earned a certain amount. I think he's earned this like 5 to 10 minutes for the first 4 or so games while Flanagan's working back in. And then he's earned at least 1 possession for like the middle of the SEC games, but he's not earned all the way through. And he can still earn that back or whatever. But I think there was a game or 2 where he really had a chance to like show some things in offense, and he's hit some stuff that we've needed. He did a game or 2 against weaker opponents. I thought maybe he would like be a little more selfish and make some more shots, and he didn't quite do it. And had turnover too, I think. So I think it kind of shows athleticism.
Yeah,
that's my Lior note.
And I love you just love having those guys there, though. I mean, we've seen in the past, all it takes is a sprained ankle or something go wrong. You're going to be really glad you have a guy like Chris Moore and Lior Berman there waiting in the wings.
Well, that kind of goes into my last note that kind of came to me last on here. I think KD, we've been talking about KD so much right now, and I hope that come the end of the year, the whole narrative is completely different. But I think KD's going to get worse before he gets better. But by the end of the year, we're going to be like, wow, KD, man, he had his issues and he like really faded away. We had to take him out of the starting lineup. We don't know. But I think in this last 4 or 5 games, once our expectations have changed for him, because we had expectations that he was be fine. He was going to come in, be a microwave or whatever. Then our expectations were, wow, a stud, absolute stud. This guy's going to be a killer for us. I can't believe we got this guy. To, man, he's been frustrating. He's on a slump. We'll see what happens. I think there's going to be at least another 2 or 3 games of that where our narrative completely changes to, man, he's really been a liability out there. He needs to figure out what his role is, where we start seeing him shrinking some roles. And like there, I think we'll be talking 4 or 5 games in, like, man, what happened? We need him to actually do something. And he's like, man, Chris Moore, Cambridge is actually taking some of his minutes now or something. But I think he's got the right attitude. I think Bruce will get it together. And by those last 4 or 5 games, he's going to have some games where he goes off and plays like just he'll go from playing this star role to playing a real like catalyst kind of role in a couple of these like games that are really important down the stretch. You might even see it in like that at Tennessee game or something where he didn't start and he's like redone his whole evaluation of how he should play as a player. And you might see him in the second half go off for 10 points and a couple steals and stuff. And you go, man, thank God he's been waiting around this whole time. He's been sitting there and he's coming together again, and come NCAA tournament, SEC tournament, we're back to relying on him at different stretches, kind of like we saw McCormick in that Final Four run, where it was really an issue throughout the year. And then when we needed him the most at the end of the season, when Jared was in some foul trouble and things, he came out and we were like, wow, this is McCormick. McCormick's, I think we'll be doing that with KD by the end of the year.
That's a great one. Bruce has been more flexible with finishing what NBA calls crunch time lineup. You know, who are you playing in the last 5 minutes? And granted, maybe it's because it's non-conference or whatever. He has played different lineups based on who's playing well in that game. Like Wendell played most of the second half last night because he was playing really well. And Lior played against St. Louis because he was playing really well, and it paid off. So I think, you know, and KD, you know, you got to keep in mind, he's the guy who just dominated Atlantis in that tournament. Played so well. He hit a game winner just the other day against St. Louis. It was maybe a questionable shot, but he made it. He had the guts to take it. He is going to win this team games in conference play. Like I really believe that. And I just hope, like you said, that arc would be fine. If that's the arc of his season and he has to kind of like settle in with Flanagan back and like figure some things out. But his energy, his effort, his passion, and his shot making are going to be needed and at multiple points probably in this conference season.
I just think we'll continue to get more frustrated with him, but then we'll look up and be surprised that we're giving him an MVP or two in the last like 5 to 10 games.
But you're right about the expectations. I mean, that's what it's all about in life in general. You know, like we didn't expect a ton. He like wowed us. He shocked us. Our expectations go way up. And then now it's like, it's not living up to that. He's still fine most of the time. But, you know, you're right. I think those expectations are slowly coming down. So he has shown elite athleticism and ability to make plays. And you just have to hope that you know, that's still there. He's just got to figure out how to channel it and play with this group that's still coming together.
Yeah, I think that does it for our kind of like preseason or our pre-SEC kind of prediction stuff. I know this podcast is probably super long at this point, but I say, you know, this is the SEC preview. I'm off work today. Matt's off work today. It's Christmas break.
I am supposed to be traveling right now, but it's okay. I'm making it work.
Yeah, well, I was supposed to be in a whole other country right now, but here we are with COVID stuff. If we got time, we want to do our final kind of for fun teams.
Yes,
we want to,
but short.
Okay, we'll keep it short. Get an Excel sheet open or something so we can kind of actually write down all these teams real quick. We're going to do a little segment here at the end, and I'm sure we'll get some more comments right at the end too from me and Matt just overall. But we want to do teams we want to win the SEC least. Like Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, kind of like the ones that are going to be probably the worst. But I want to put it in order from the teams we'd be okay with winning the SEC versus teams we wouldn't be.
Typing them out now.
All right. We'll see how it goes. It'll be interesting to see, like, a lot of this comes down to our place in the SEC world from a recruiting standpoint, from what teams are hot right now, historically kind of stuff. Like, we'll see with Kentucky that they might not be as high as you might think they would be because it's just holding status quo when Kentucky wins. That doesn't change our place in the world, really.
So is number one the team that we most don't want to win the SEC?
Yeah. We'll go from the other direction. I'll pick a couple teams that, like, if they won the SEC, it'd be like whatever.
Okay. Okay.
You got to pull that up on the screen when you.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm not. Oh,
hopefully this goes up on YouTube. I'm going to try to set that up today, and you'll help build. This will be helpful. We try to keep it all podcast, but we are putting things up on the screen that help, like, us find things and help see the rankings and different stuff. All right, let's see who we got here.
So I'm going to nominate a team that I would actually love to win the SEC that will not. A couple teams. Vanderbilt. I'm going to put Vanderbilt for me up towards the top at number one.
I'm putting. Are you doing your own list too, or are we going?
I don't know. We talk it out. We can have.
Let's talk it out. We'll do a pod. We've been on the same wavelength for so many things. I think Missouri's actually should be above Vanderbilt, because if Vanderbilt starts coming on and they're in Nashville and they have a similar recruiting area, Cambridge is from Nashville. Like, that's the kind of team that could steal some recruits from us. Missouri wins the SEC. Sure, it sucks because their recruiting will go up and we'll have to play them. But that's true of anybody on here. We don't recruit Missouri's same area. We don't deal with them at all. So if they win it, it's like fine.
What about is there anybody else you
I'm afraid Texas A&M is dangerous. They could build a program.
Maybe South Carolina. Or
let's put South Carolina in there. I don't think that would affect us. Like, they all affect us eventually. No, we don't want anyone to win but us. But I think those are done. And I think you put Vanderbilt underneath that, maybe.
All right, I'm good with that.
And then we have to talk about, I think, the Mississippi schools and not Georgia, because I don't want them to win it all. So maybe Mississippi
Florida.
schools. I don't want them to win either. They could be, at any moment, they could jump up and be a juggernaut like we've seen before. I think it's between the Mississippi schools and Texas A&M, because Mississippi is closer, but you are afraid, just like in football, that Texas A&M can jump up and be like a dangerous team nationally.
I would rather Mississippi State win. I don't know why. Maybe it's just.
I just don't feel like they'd be able to. I don't feel like even if they won the SEC, they'd be able to build on it either way. I think the same with Ole Miss. They just do not have the backing to build on it. And then I think maybe you even put Kentucky after that, actually, because Kentucky. I'd take it back. Put Texas A&M there.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
They're far away from a recruiting standpoint. You get annoyed if they really move up the rankings from that standpoint. But now I think there's a good argument to put Kentucky next, because if Kentucky wins the SEC, what does that do to us? Nothing really. They're always going to have risk for certain kids. It's just status quo. I don't want them to win because it's annoying to watch Kentucky win all the time. Their fans are obnoxious, but them winning doesn't impact us that hard.
I totally agree. Let's reset. So for people who are just listening, so the 6 we have to decide still, we're deciding the teams we would be most okay with winning the SEC besides Auburn. And the 6 we have left that we do not want to win: Alabama, Arkansas, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee. So where would you go next?
You either got to go Arkansas or Florida. I think that's the next tier on there. Florida could be a juggernaut at 8 point. You say Arkansas could be a juggernaut at 8 point. I'm annoyed with them right now because they're getting that hype. But I think you got to put Arkansas, because I think ultimately if Florida got the same height Arkansas is getting right now, we lose out more. From a recruiting standpoint, from a national standpoint, Florida's fan base is so huge too that it changes the game a little bit and they get obnoxious, and Arkansas seems far away. So then Florida next.
Okay, yeah.
Would suck. They're not like a every year rival or anything, but they could turn into a juggernaut at any point. And Gainesville's not really that far away. We get some Florida kids. We get some Atlanta kids.
It's got to be Georgia next, right?
I don't know, because I think maybe you put LSU, because Georgia, man, can you imagine if Georgia wins the SEC, the breakthrough in recruiting and like the travesty if Alabama and Georgia are good at basketball and we have to recruit against that. We have to deal with that, and we play Alabama and Georgia every year.
True.
So you I might put LSU there, because if LSU wins the SEC, they have all that Will Wade insanity. They might just be having to vacate that anyways, hopefully. And at least when LSU wins, it's a little harder for them to build on top of that, because everyone is they will be the most hated team in college basketball if they win the SEC. They definitely will be amongst SEC fans. People will just be like violently upset with them. So you put LSU, like I think that they won't be able to build on it the same way Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama will.
Okay.
Georgia's still tough again. Georgia's
I
still
would
tough
go
again.
Georgia. To me, this is not hard. I know what it's a good argument, but I would have had Georgia before LSU probably. I just hate LSU.
Okay. I'm just saying, if they pull something off and become a good team, you're going to be wishing it was Tennessee that was the good team.
But again, would you rather Tennessee actually win something or Alabama go back to back?
No.
Do you want that?
So, I think it's settled next that Tennessee, because Tennessee has not won the SEC since 2017 or 18. And so it won't be like this big build-up thing necessarily. It'll just be them kind of finally meeting hype. And then last, of course, is Alabama. And we just can't have them go 2 years in a row. We can't have it.
And that's what I was going to say. It's not so much just the buy. Yeah, we don't like Alabama. We don't want them to win. But it's the fact of what they accomplished last year that I think is the reason they're at the top of this list. Because, like you said, I mean, again, it becomes a status thing, right? Like, we won the SEC regular season. They won the SEC regular season. We won the SEC tournament. They won the SEC tournament. And both of those hadn't won it in 30 years, or 40 years. We went to the Final Four. They haven't yet. We have not won back-to-back SEC championships, So, like, you just don't want them accomplishing things that we haven't done. We want to be the first to do things. Hopefully national title one day, maybe, who knows. And
like we were saying too, there's been a lot of teams that have jumped up and done things in 1 year and they don't repeat next year and they fade away to nonsense and you barely remember that they won the SEC that year, or they had a good year, whatever. You do it twice in a row, you build a reputation. And Alabama could be a big difference. We've already seen it with them losing those 3 bad games this year, that their reputation can go up and down really quickly, even in a conference schedule, from beating Gonzaga and people like, whoa, man, this Alabama. So Nate Oates is really building something down there, man. They're really something special, to losing to Davidson and Iona and Memphis. People going, yeah, I don't know, man. There's something wrong down there. It's Alabama. They only care about football. It just changes the whole narrative. And so win SC again, it would be brutal against a team like when we have a team like this that we think something special. It was one thing to lose when they did it in 2020 in a weird year with COVID, with a bunch of seniors, and we were kind of taking a year off almost. This year, if they do it, their fans are going to be super obnoxious. It's going to be tough. It's going to be getting really frustrating when we kind of have our relief in basketball to have this happen. Yeah,
no doubt. I agree with that list. I think that's an interesting exercise. And it really, I know people probably don't believe it because we really don't like Alabama and Tennessee, but I really do think it would change some year to year, based on the narratives like we talked about and what's best for our program. And I think right now, it would be rough if Alabama went back. I think that's the big one. LSU, you can get mad about for all the things we talked about. Tennessee, it would be frustrating because we've kind of kept them down. They've been good, but we've kept them from actually accomplishing anything.
You can almost put them in tiers. Like those top 3 we just picked, any of them win the SEC. I mean, Georgia's unrealistic. That's more of like a long-term thing or whatever. It's just going to really hurt. It's going to hurt from like a recruiting standpoint, a narrative standpoint, like fan standpoint, like all of that's going to hurt. And then you kind of jump to a next tier of like Florida, LSU, Arkansas, of like, we just don't want them to win. Like, it's just not like they're going to be in our way and they're going to build a tougher program to beat in the future. And then you jump to like the next tier. Kentucky's kind of by itself with like, all right, that's just status quo. We just don't like them. It's so annoying to watch them win every year. And then after that, you kind of like, okay, it goes, it's just
all the other ones you don't care about as much. Yeah. Well, cool. Any other kind of big picture thoughts? Obviously, we've talked a lot. Hope everybody kind of uses this as a primer after Christmas for looking ahead to this. I think it's going to be an awesome year. I've been saying that. I think there's going to be a lot of good basketball. If you're just now kind of making the switch, focus on basketball, this is a great time. Definitely tune in with us if you want to. We do episodes after every game. We're going to keep that up throughout the year, and just really excited to see where this goes. It could go a ton of different directions. And I've said it 3 or 4 times, but LSU game 1 is a heck of a way to kick it off.
I'd just say, to finish it up for me, enjoy every game. We're already seeing tons of cancellations because of COVID. We missed all last year for the most part. It was a weird year because of COVID. Enjoy every game you can. Another part is there's a lot of focus in basketball and now in football too on the postseason, on March Madness and on the SEC tournament and where our seeds are going to be and different things. Enjoy every win, enjoy every game. It's just fun to have a team that you can feel excited about, and a team that every game that we go into is an opportunity instead of like an issue or something just to throw on in the background. Like if you get exhausted halfway through SEC play, I think everyone does a little bit, even this, especially with us doing a podcast on top, we're going to probably, there'll probably be a little bit of a grind at some point in there. Like enjoy it, man. We don't have this forever. Like don't think that this is forever. At any moment, this thing, as we've seen with pandemic stuff, or we've seen with NCAA stuff, or we've seen with college sports, the way it's going in general, like enjoy the mess out of this right now. Don't skip a game. Don't say like, oh, I'll listen to that. Like, we've seen some of our listeners on different podcasts. We saw like, there's like little dips for some of the like bigger blowouts we have and smaller opponents, man. Enjoy them all. Like it'll be a big deal to enjoy this LSU one, but enjoy the little ones too. Cause there was a lot of days for us, a little older people and even older than us, that, those were not given. Those were not fun. You only had to listen to them on radio just to listen till you lose in Mississippi State at home or whatever. So enjoy it. We're having a good time. I hope y'all are having a good time too. Review on the podcast stuff. We don't have that many yet. We keep, you hear from lots of podcasts. I hear from a lot of podcasts. It means a lot to us because we are newish and we could really use some like reviews on there. Tell your friends about it. And we're excited.
Yeah. Thanks again to Jay Phillips, Michael Floyd for helping us out, kind of giving us some context for going into this conference play. Appreciate their time. And we will we won't see you. Well, we may if we're on YouTube by then. We'll find out. But you'll hear from us after the LSU game on Wednesday night. War Eagle Jackson.
War Eagle Matt.